Hey guys, tonight we step into the frostbitten world of medieval Europe, where survival isn't guaranteed and not by daylight, and especially not when darkness falls. The stars above you are sharp and cruel, like tiny shards of ice suspended in the sky, and the night traps around your village like a wolf's jaws are slow, patient, and merciless. There's no central heating, no thick glass windows, and definitely no electric blankets. You're wrapped in whatever rags you've stitched together over the years, your breath fogging in the air even inside your home, and the fire has burned low. Welcome to the cold reality of a peasant's night, where surviving till morning is an accomplishment, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake with a start, not from a nightmare, but from your fingers going numb in the cold. The fire has nearly died, and the room is dark. Only faint moonlight bleeds through the tiny gap in your wooden shutter. You don't move right away. You just lie there, curled into yourself like a question mark, listening to the slow crackle of one dying ember. Cold seeps through everything, the walls, the floor, even the straw in your mattress. It's not just uncomfortable, it's personal. Medieval nights were not cozy. They were a test. And each time you survived one, it meant you were clever, lucky, or just too stubborn to die. You rise slowly, joints stiff from the chill, and shuffle toward the hearth. It's the only source of light and life, and right now, it's both losing. You stir the ashes with a charred stick and blow gently, watching for that faint orange glow to reignite. The room is tiny, no more than 2 steps across in any direction, and the roof above you sags with age, its thatch groaning under the weight of frost. Outside, the wind moans low through the cracks in the wall. You pull your shawl tighter. It's been darned too many times to count, and still there's that one draft that always finds your neck. Historians still argue whether peasants truly lived in one-room huts with dirt floors or whether that's a myth built from centuries of assumptions. But tonight, standing barefoot on packed earth colder than a grave, it doesn't feel like a myth. You glance toward the beta, a shared pile of straw and old cloths where your family huddles, snoring softly. Your youngest clutches a carved wooden sheep, and your eldest has somehow wriggled halfway out from the covers. You tuck her back in, pressing your hand to her cheek. Still warm, still breathing. Good. Life expectancy in medieval Europe, somewhere around 35 years if you were lucky. Clean, and maybe a little boring. The cold didn't care how old you were. It took babies and elders first, but sometimes it just took whoever happened to be wet or barefoot at the wrong time. Death was less a dramatic villain and more of a regular visitor. You left a seat for it at the table, and still, you go on, because what choice do you have? The pigs grunt in their pen, likely dreaming of turnips. You consider joining them. Their breath, at least, would be warm. Some families slept with their animals outright, a livestock huddled inside for heat, their musky bodies generating more warmth than your sad excuse for a fire ever could. Later, maybe. For now, you crouch beside the hearth and feed it a precious stick of wood. There's a superstition you whisper to yourself, one passed down from your mother: keep the fire fed, and the spirits will stay in the wind. You're not superstitious much, but tonight, you mutter it all the same. The wind shifts, and the house creaks like an old man's knees. Somewhere beyond the thatch, a fox yips, or maybe a spirit, who knows? A quirky but little-known fact: some medieval peasants believed in the wild hunt, a spectral procession of ghosts and gods galloping through the night sky during winter storms. If you heard them, you had to stay indoors. If you saw them, well, then you were marked for death. Makes your midnight bathroom run sound a lot riskier, doesn't it? Your toes tingle with returning feeling as the fire catches again. Small flames lick upward, casting dancing shadows on the wooden beams above. They make the room look almost alive, like it's breathing with you, warming to your effort. For a moment, it feels okay. Not warm, exactly, but survivable, and that's enough. Tomorrow, you'll haul more wood, maybe mend a hole in the roof, and check the root cellar for anything edible that hasn't molded over. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, You slide back under the covers and tuck yourself in among your family, your dog curled behind your knees, the last whisper of fire warming your face. You'll drift into sleep thinking of spring, or maybe just of getting through till morning. The cold has teeth, and even in your sleep, it nips at your ankles. Dawn is hours away, but your brain already knows, it's going to be another day of battling the frost. Still curled beneath the patchwork covers, you open your eyes and scan the dim shape of your home. It's not a house the way modern folks think of it. It's more like a broken bar shelter, something cobbled together with dirt, sweat, and half-forgotten wisdom. But hey, it hasn't collapsed yet, and that's saying something. The walls around you aren't stone or brick, they're made of wattle and daub, which is just a fancy way of saying woven sticks smeared with a mud and straw paste. Sounds primitive? Maybe, but it works, sort of. It keeps out the wind unless the wind gets too nosy, and the rain only leaks in one corner now, the roof. Thatched, dried reeds layered thickly and pinned down with wooden pegs. Every year it sags a little more, like a tired spine. You've stuffed moss into the holes, wedged bits of cloth where birds have tried to nest, and still, sometimes in the dead of night, you hear the slow plip of meltwater dripping onto the packed earth. A quick note for the curious: thatch might seem cozy in storybooks, but in real life it's an excellent home for rodents. There's probably a mouse up there right now, chewing through a bit of leftover grain or nesting with stolen wool. You once named one of them, regretted it when the cat caught him. Historians still debate whether peasants routinely lived in such one-room dwellings or if that's more a literary oversimplification. Some accounts describe more divided interiors, a part living space, part byre for the animals. But here, where you are, it's one muddled space, defined more by smell than walls. You cross to the far wall where the cold seeps in most aggressively. It's rough to the touch, slightly damp, and cool like the inside of a tomb. You press your hand flat against Tita, another strange ritual that's half habit, half science experiment. If the wall's dampness has crept higher, that means the frost outside has sunk deeper. And deeper frost means deeper problems. Your floor is earthen, nothing fancy. No planks, no tiles, just hard-packed soil mixed with straw and bits of gravel. In summer, it's dusty. In winter, it's rock. You once stepped out of bed barefoot and thought your heel had frozen to it. You learned to make it more bearable. You've spread old sacks and animal skins across certain spots. Some families added a layer of ash or rushes, changing it regularly to reduce the stench. You're not quite that diligent, but you give it a good raking now and then. There's always a faint smell of damp hay, sweat, and soot lingering. You'd be surprised how quickly your nose stops caring. On one wall hangs a tapestry, a well, calling it that is generous. It's really an old cloth embroidered by your great-aunt, depicting a faded rooster and an even more faded sun, but it helps block the draft. And it reminds you that someone once had time to sew for beauty, not just warmth. Fun fringe tidbit: some peasants used animal bladders stretched over window holes to let light in while keeping the wind out. Not elegant, not pleasant, but it worked. Today, yours are just shuttered wooden panels, crude but functional. There's no glass, of course. Glass is for churches and kings. You once saw it in the village chapel, sunlight catching the colored panes like captured fire. Back home, your windows are more like invitations to every passing breeze. So you plug them at night with rags, old clothing, and one extremely stubborn goose feather that keeps finding its way back in. Every piece of your home has a story. The wooden beam above the hearth, dragged from the forest during a thunderstorm. The stool by the door, carved from the stump of a lightning-struck tree. You swear it hums during storms. Maybe it's cursed, maybe it's just warped. But this isn't just a structure. It's your defense against the cold, against wolves, against loneliness. It groans, it leaks, it occasionally sheds bugs. And yet it holds together like an old friend who always shows up late but somehow saves the day anyway. Outside, you can hear distant footsteps crunching snow. Someone's already heading to the well. Poor soul. The rope freezes overnight, and once, it took you 20 minutes just to loosen it enough to pull water. That's why you filled your own barrels yesterday, stacking them in the corner like small, frozen trophies. Smart you. Past you just turned present you a break from frostbitten fingers. You notice a patch of frost forming on the inside of the door frame. That's new. You press your thumb to it, watch the print slowly melt into the wood grain. The house is losing the fight, again. But you don't get discouraged. Not exactly. This is the game. Winter comes every year, and every year you make it play by your rule. Mud walls, moss stuffing, draft-blocking tapestries and all. You return to your bed, slide back into the still warm spot beside your siblings, and feel the heartbeats of the house around you. The cold's out there, and you're in here. That's not nothing. And if the roof doesn't cave in, and the fire doesn't go out, and the mice don't stage a rebellion, you just might make it to morning. The fire is breathing again barely, but it's alive. You hunch over it, feeding in a bit of kindling, coaxing flame from orange ember. Every spark feels like a promise. Warmth, light, a few more hours without frostbite. In a medieval peasant's world, the hearth wasn't just a fireplace. It was everything. Your kitchen, your heater, your lantern, your gossip corner, your medicine cabinet, and when necessary your emergency cremation plan for bits of livestock that died under questionable circumstances. Yes, sometimes chickens just a broken bar gave up. The hearth squats in the center of your life, blackened by decades of smoke, and surrounded by soot-scabbed stones arranged more by instinct than geometry. A battered pot hangs from a hook, dangling like some ancient artifact, perpetually smelling of onion, turnip, and regret. Even when it's empty, you can still see yesterday's ash, piled into the corners like ghost snow. The last time you swept it out was a broken bar. Actually, you can't remember. There's a broom nearby, made of bound twigs, but you're not feeling heroic yet. Right now, you're focused on warmth. Mainstream history agrees that most medieval peasants relied heavily on open hearths. Chimneys, despite what fairy tales might suggest, were rare luxuries until much later. Most homes vented smoke through a hole in the roof, or, more likely, not at all. You've gotten used to the sting in your eyes, the way smoke curls around your head like a lazy cat. Sometimes it even helps. It keeps out the bugs and dries your herbs when you hang them from the rafters. You shuffle closer to the flames, cupping your hands and blowing into them. Cold fingertips return to life with pins and needles. Your breath hangs in the air like fog. You listen to the crackle and pop of the wood, and for a moment, it's like the hearth is talking to you, saying, "Don't worry, I've got you a broken bar until the wood runs out." And you believe it. Mostly, there's a phrase passed down through the village: "He who tends the fire, tends the soul." That might sound poetic, but it's also code for, you fall asleep, we all freeze. Tonight, it's your turn to keep it going, to add logs, adjust the stones, make sure the youngest doesn't kick off their blankets in their sleep. You wrap yourself in an old woolen shawl, scratchy as a sheep's bad mood. It smells faintly of mildew and elderberry. Don't ask why, and is your closest companion most winter nights. You settle onto a low stool carved from an old tree stump and start poking through the embers with your fire iron. It used to be a spearhead, you're told, salvaged from some long ago skirmish. Now it's your cooking utensil. If the knight who lost it could see this, he'd probably sue you. You reach for a small pouch of salt and sprinkle a bit onto a frozen hunk of meat hanging by the wall. It's rabbit, probably. The preserving smoke from the hearth has turned it a strange grayish-brown, but you're grateful for it. Smoke isn't just flavor here, it's survival. Salting and smoking are your best bets at keeping food through the cold months. Fridges, please. You are the fridge. A quirky fact you might enjoy: peasants often hung meats from the ceiling beams to keep them out of the reach of rats and cats. In theory. In practice, it just made for more athletic rats. You once watched one tightrope walk across a rafter like a circus performer. You respected him, then chased him with a spoon. You ladle a bit of yesterday's stew into a wooden bowl. It's mostly mush now with soft roots and grain, but hot mush beats cold anything. As you sip, your thoughts drift to the fire again. Historians still argue whether hearths were more efficient than we give them credit for, or whether we've over-romanticized the whole medieval coziness thing. You, with your smoke-reddened eyes and perpetually scorched socks, vote for not cozy. Sure, it's better than sleeping outside with the wolves, but it's also a constant, smoky struggle between heat and air. You glance up at the smoke hole in the roof. Tonight, it's letting out steam like a kettle, but sometimes the wind blows the wrong way, and you get a room full of smoke. You've seen neighbors crawl out coughing, half convinced they'd been cursed. You've even heard tales of people collapsing in their sleep because the fire choked them before the cold could. Grim? Absolutely. But very on brand for the Middle Ages. And yet, here you are, watching the flames dance, warming your bowl with one hand and your toes with the other. You start humming an old lullaby your mother used to sing, a tune lost in translation, but full of the same warmth the fire gives you now. Your youngest stirs behind you, murmuring nonsense in his sleep. You glance back. He's buried deep beneath the covers, tiny fingers twitching, maybe dreaming of spring, or of bread. Same difference. The fire crackles. You add another log, not too big you have to make it last, just enough to keep the embers glowing, to whisper a little longer, "We're not done yet." And as the wind growls outside like a beast circling the walls, you sit back, bowl in lap, and watch the flickering dance of shadows on stone and skin. Because tonight, the hearth is still your heart, and it's still beating. You wake again because, honestly, nobody sleeps straight through a medieval winter night. This time, it's not the cold or the creaky roof that rouses you, it's the foot in your face. Specifically, your cousin's foot. And it's cold. Like, corpse cold. You swat it away gently, muttering something between a curse and a prayer. Then pull your part of the blanket tighter around your shoulders. Your cousin mumbles and rolls the other way, taking at least half the covers with him. Classic. Welcome to communal sleeping, medieval style. It's not just tradition, it's strategic. Because when the fire fades, and the wind snakes through the cracks, there's one resource that never runs out: body heat. So you sleep together, all of you, in one big heap of limbs, hay, and wool. Parents, children, grandparents, the occasional cousin passing through, and even the doga who, let's be honest, probably smells better than half the humans. If you're lucky, the piglet's still small enough to sleep at your feet without rooting through your hair. There's no shame in the huddle. It's survival. Hot bunking, they call it now, though you're pretty sure medieval folks didn't give it a trendy name. You simply shared warmth because freezing to death alone wasn't anyone's idea of a noble end. You lie there for a moment, listening to the familiar nocturnal symphony: snores, coughs, a baby murmuring in its sleep, someone whispering a prayer, and the ever-present sound of shifting straw. It crackles beneath every movement. Noisy, but better than nothing. Straw mattresses were common, stuffed with hay or reeds and changed out when the smell got too offensive or when something started living inside them. You once found a beetle the size of your thumb under your pillow. Named him Bernard. Regretted that, too. Mainstream history confirms that sleeping arrangements for peasants were highly communal, often dictated by practicality rather than comfort or modesty. Beds were precious, blankets more so. You've seen your family fight over one particularly warm sheepskin like it was the crown of Charlemagne. You roll over and try to reclaim a bit of space, tugging at the blanket your cousin commandeered in his sleep. No luck. So you tuck your knees up, hands under your arms, and focus on the warm spot behind you or your dog, curled into a tight cinnamon roll of sleep and dog breath. Speaking of dogs, quirky fact, in many medieval villages, dogs weren't just companions, they were sometimes used specifically as bed warmers. Not even joking. The term three-dog night comes from the idea that you'd need 3 dogs to survive particularly brutal temperatures. You've only got the one, so tonight is a one-dog gamble. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you notice how low the fire has gotten again. Embers now. You could get up, stir it, maybe toss in another log, but the thought of stepping out from under the blanket cocoon ice a broken bar horrifying. And honestly, the kid on your right is practically glued to your ribcage. If you move, it'll be like trying to refold a medieval origami. Instead, you close your eyes and let your mind wander, drifting toward warmer thoughts. You remember summer, when the night air was soft and the ground didn't feel like punishment. You remember falling asleep under stars, grass cool but not biting. That contrast makes winter nights like this feel even more absurd. You could barely breathe from the heat a few months ago, and now you're bargaining with your own toes to stay attached. Historians still argue whether peasants slept in polyphasic cycles, meaning 2 separate sleep periods with a wakeful stretch in the middle, or whether that's more of a modern theory projected backward. But here, lying awake in the inky middle of the night, surrounded by snoring bodies and flickering shadows. It doesn't really matter, you are awake, and you do this every night. There's a conversation happening across the room, a whispers between two older relatives, voices low and steady, something about the roof again, the way it's been groaning more with the snow. You already know what that means. Someone's going to have to climb up there come morning and knock the weight down. You pretend not to hear, just in case they're thinking of recruiting you. Your elbow itches. You scratch it absent-mindedly through the woolen sleeve, which you haven't taken off in days. Nobody really strips down to sleep in winter. You'd have to be either wildly rich or suicidally optimistic. You sleep in layers, as many as you've got. It's not fashion, it's armor. Your breath makes little clouds in front of your face. You could draw shapes in them, if you weren't so tired. Maybe a bird, maybe a loaf of bread. That second one makes your stomach grumble. Of course, you shift slightly, trying not to wake anyone, and pull the dog in a little closer. She lets out a soft grunt but doesn't object. Good dog, warm dog, better than some family members. Honestly, the straw rustles again. Someone turns over, someone else mumbles in Latin. And you close your eyes and pretend you're somewhere else. Somewhere warm, somewhere with feather beds and hot soup and blankets that aren't shared with 6 people and a terrier named Agnes. But you know this is it. This is survival. You, the fire, the huddle, the dog, and the patience to make it through another few hours. Eventually, the cold dulls, not because it goes away but because you get used to it. Your body finds its little pockets of warmth, your brain stops protesting, your breath slows, and you finally start drifting off, until someone snores in your ear like a trumpet blast and the whole process resets. You don't wake up so much as emerge like a half-frozen loaf of bread rising back to room temperature. The fire is little more than a whisper now, the last few coals glowing like forgotten stars. The cold has returned in full force, curling around your neck and sliding under the blanket with you like an uninvited ghost. You rub your arms, yawn into the sleeve of your tunic, and begin the daily ritual, assessing the damage. Did the frost creep in last night? Did the roof hold? Are all your toes still attached? You wiggle them inside your boots. Still there, still suspiciously numb, but present. Next step, layers. You stand as slowly, because joints in winter are like badly whittled hinges, and reach for the bundle by your bedside. It contains your most prized possessions, clothing, or what passes for it. Not the soft, tailored, pristine linen of noble dreams. This is wool, thick, coarse, sometimes stained with who knows what, but warm. You begin the delicate task of layering up for the day. Undergarment, overtunic, patched leggings, apron if needed, and the crown jewel, your wool cloak. It's itchy, it smells faintly of smoke and cabbage, it weighs nearly as much as a sheep, but oh, it holds heat like magic. Mainstream historical sources confirm that most peasants had maybe 1 or 2 full sets of clothing, and in winter, it wasn't about fashion, it was about survival. The more layers you had, the better your chances. Wool was common, durable, and surprisingly water-resistant when untreated. Linen was softer, but rarer. You wore it sparingly, like a prayer or a favor. You stuff rags into your boots, securing the patches with bits of string. You might not have socks, but you have innovation, a small but satisfying win, a quirky little fashion tip from the 1300s. Peasants sometimes stuffed bracken or thistle down into their tunics for insulation. Yes, plants, spiky ones, because the cold hurts, but not as much as frostbite. You tried it once, still have the scars, still prefer sheep. You reach for your glove, SOL, glove, singular. The left one, the right was lost during the sheep stampede last month, and you're still salty about it. So today you'll go full peasant pirate, tucking your right hand into your sleeve when the cold bites too hard. Practicality over symmetry. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant truly suffered from clothing shortages to this degree, or whether later depictions exaggerated the hardship for dramatic effect. But as you wrap a scarf around your neck made from unraveling an old sack and reeving it by candlelight, you can safely say, the drama checks out. Your little sister sits up, hair wild, nose red, and immediately begins scratching at her sleeves. Fleas again, she mutters. You both sigh. Wool's warmth comes with a trade-off. It's like Airbnb for pests. Lice, fleas, Even the occasional check of your garments are less clothing and more biodiversity experiments. You once joked about charging them rent. Nobody laughed. You pull your cloak over your head and feel its weight settle like a hug from a mildly abusive relative. There's comfort in it, but also an unspoken threat. If you lose me, you freeze. You add a belt to keep everything in place, a leather, cracked with age, but still functional. Then a little pouch at your side, filled with dried herbs for tea, a piece of stale bread, and a rusty sewing needle wrapped in cloth, your medieval version of an emergency kit. As you move toward the door, your breath fogs in the cold light streaming through the cracks in the wall. Outside, the sun is up, but it brings no warmth, just visibility. Everything is whitewashed with frost, even the thatch sparkles, like the whole village has been dipped in sugar. You brace yourself and push open the door. A gust of cold slaps your face. You stagger forward anyway, boots scrunching the snow and straw beneath them. Your woolen cloak whips around your legs like a feral animal. You spot your neighbor shuffling toward the well, cloak dragging like a train behind her. Her expression says everything. Yes, it's freezing. No, I'm not happy about it. You nod in solidarity. Another neighbor walks by in what can only be described as layering chaos: 2 cloaks, 3 hats, and what may or may not be a sock wrapped around their face. You approve. Desperation is the mother of warmth. As you walk toward the livestock pen, a soft laugh escapes your lips. You remember the story of the villager who once tried to wear a cooked goose as a foot warmer. Didn't end well, but it did smell amazing. Back inside, your sister is struggling with her own shawl, and your mother is trying to light a fresh fire with kindling that may as well be frozen soup. You return and kneel beside her, offering a flint and a look that says, "Tag me in." Together, you coax the fire back to life. The room slowly fills with smoke and warmth, your breath no longer visible. The scratchy wool itches, your boots rub, and something is definitely biting your thigh under all those layers. But you're warm, kind of, and in this world, kind of is a victory. Darkness falls early in the dead of winter. By late afternoon, the sky is already bruising with purple, and the wind howls down from the hills like a hungry thing. You're back inside, tucked near the fire, because where else would you be? But rest doesn't come easy tonight. The hearth is lit, the children are fed, and the dog is snoring softly. Still a broken bar. Your eyes stay wide, fixed on the window shutters that rattle just a little too often. You listen, not for footsteps or voices, but for something older, stranger. In the medieval world, night wasn't just darkness, it was danger, and not just the kind with claws and teeth. The cold could kill you, yes, but so could the things you couldn't see, things that slid through keyholes, things that whispered your name in the dark. There's a knock on the door once, just once, but nobody moves. You don't ask, "Who is it?" because you already know no one should be out there. The wind rattles again, and this time, the candle flickers too. Your mother, calm but firm, mutters a quick purr, half in Latin, half in Panic, and tosses a pinch of salt over her shoulder. You follow suit, though you're not sure why. It's just a broken bar. What you do. These little habits are armor. Salt, iron nails above the door, straw crosses tucked under the thatch. You don't question them, because in winter, you don't tempt fate. Historians still debate how deeply superstitions saturated daily medieval life. Some argue that peasant folk religion was more pragmatic than mystical or rituals tied to seasons and harvests, not demons and ghosts. Others insist the supernatural was woven into the fabric of every nightfall, especially in the bleak hush of winter. Based on the way your heart just skipped a beat, you're inclined to believe the latter. Tonight, it's not just the cold that crawls under your skin, it's the stories. Your grandmother used to speak of the night hag, a spirit that sat on your chest as you slept, stealing your breath. You'd wake up gasping, paralyzed, your limbs frozen, unable to scream. Today we might call that sleep paralysis. Back then, it meant something had gotten in. You roll onto your side and glance toward the door. It's still latched. The wooden beam across it is secure, but part of you wonders, is that enough? A quirky detail. Some villagers used to smear ashes in the shape of a cross on their doors to ward off evil spirits, especially in midwinter, when the veil was considered thin. Others hung bits of iron or herbs by the entrance. You keep a sprig of dried rosemary above your bed. It smells awful now, But that's the point. Outside, the world has become a silhouette. Trees blur into sky. The village is quiet, too quiet. Somewhere, far off, a dog barks once and goes silent. The fire cracks, and you jump. No one else stirs. Your siblings are tangled together in sleep, forming a pile of limbs and blankets. The dog lifts her head for a moment, sniffs the air, and then, satisfied nothing's going to eat here, sinks back into slumber. You sit up, blanket around your shoulders, and stare into the fire. It's calming now, less predator, more lullaby. The flames sway like dancers, their flickers mirrored in your eyes. You've always thought fire had a voice. Not words exactly, but rhythm. Tonight, it hums low and steady, like a heartbeat. But just as you begin to relax, your uncle mutters something in his sleep, something unintelligible. Then again, louder. You freeze. It's nonsense, but urgent. You lean over and shake him gently. He wakes with a start, then glares at you like you're the weirdo. Just a dream, he says gruffly, before pulling the blanket back over his head and vanishing into the pile. You whisper, "Fine, but if something eats you, I'm keeping your boots." You smile, but only a little. The fear of night spirits, witches, and wandering souls isn't something you laugh at too much. Not when you've seen people light candles for missing children. Not when you remember the girl who disappeared last winter during a blizzard and was found weeks later with her face frozen in a scream. People said it was exposure. Others whispered about the forest. You don't like the forest. It's funny, isn't it? You spend your whole day chopping wood, tending to animals, hauling water, hard, gritty, real work. But as soon as the sun goes down, you start thinking about shadows, curses, and invisible teeth in the dark. That's the thing about medieval winter nights. They take your logic and wrap it in a blanket of fog. You stand and go check the door one last time. Still closed, still secure. Just in case, you spit on the threshold. Grandma's favorite trick. She said spirits don't like spit. Maybe because it's warm, or maybe because it's gross. Either way, you're not taking chances. You return to bed and slide under the blankets, careful not to disturb anyone. You lie on your back and stare up at the beams overhead, where dried herbs and old feathers dangle from string. The fire pops again, and finally, slowly, your eyes begin to close. If there are spirits out there, let them shiver. You're warm, your belly's full, and your rosemary sprig is doing overtime. You've got wool, a dog, a stubborn streak, and a grandmother's superstitions woven into your bones. Let the wind howl. You're not afraid of the night. Just a broken bar, maybe a little wary. You're up before the sun. Again, not because you want to be, but because you had to pee. And medieval plumbing, as you know by now, is basically just go outside and pray nothing bites you mid-squat. You step back into the house, shivering harder than before. Your boots are damp, your fingers sting. The fire's nearly out again, of course, but you toss on a few splinters and crouch low, coaxing it back to life like a fussy child. There's a trick you learned from the old man who lives near the forest. He showed you how to shape clay balls, bake them by the hearth, and tuck them under your bedding at night. They stay warm for hours so long after the fire dies. You never believed him until the first time you tried it. Now, you wish you had 10. One sits in the corner now, cracked from last night's heat but still faintly warm. You roll it in your hands, grateful for even that tiny bit of stored sun. These are the things you cling to during winter, the small clevernesses that make life slightly less awful. Because sometimes, in a medieval peasant's world, ingenuity is your only defense. You've learned to work with what you have: clay, stone, leftover ash, and dumb luck. Another favorite invention? Bed bricks. You heat them by the fire, wrap them in cloth, and slide them into the bed before climbing in. If you forget the cloth, you'll have a nasty surprise. Yes, that's a burn on your thigh. And no, you're not showing anyone. You move to the back of the house where the extra stones are stacked, pulled from the creek months ago. Round, flat, perfect for heat retention. You set a few by the fire, lining them up like sleepy soldiers. It takes time, but you've got time. Morning work in the fields is delayed today. The frost is too thick to do anything but wait. Historians still argue whether these warming techniques were widespread or just practiced in certain regions. Written records from the period are sparse, and most peasants weren't scribbling down bedtime routines in Latin, but archaeological finds suggest heated stones and thermal ingenuity were absolutely a thing, especially in colder parts of Europe. And then there's the strangest warming trick of all cabbage poultices. Yes, you heard right, you once saw a healer wrap someone's feet in boiled cabbage leaves. Supposedly, it kept the blood flowing. You tried it once out of sheer desperation. Your feet smelled weird for a week, but hey, you didn't lose a toe. When the house smells of smoke, sweat, and wool, but this morning, the combination feels comforting. You sit on the edge of the hearth, hands outstretched, and sigh. The quiet is nice, peaceful, a rare moment between the frost and the chaos of chores. You glance over at the others still asleep, a tangled sculpture of humanity. The dog has somehow claimed the warmest spot. Again, you shift your weight and hear the faint jingle of the iron pot you set up last night. Inside is a bit of porridge. Cold, congealed, but edible. You scrape it into a wooden bowl, add a pinch of salt, and hope it tastes better than it looks. It doesn't, but it's food, sort of. You remember your mother telling you how, when she was little, they used to bury heated stones in the center of the room under a layer of straw. The straw kept the warmth from escaping too quickly, and the stones radiated heat for hours. The trick: don't step in the wrong spot or you'd twist your ankle. You learned that one the hard way. You chuckle softly, spoon halfway to your mouth, when your uncle stirs from the pile. Did you add more wood? He asks groggily, rubbing his eyes. Of course, you say. You think I enjoy watching my breath? He grunts and pulls a blanket over his head. There's something strangely satisfying about this moment. It's miserable, yes, but shared misery is kind of a broken bar bonding. You all know what it takes to survive nights like this. It's not just heat, it's knowledge, rituals, timing, the understanding of what works and what doesn't, like never letting the fire go out completely, like never putting wet boots too close to the flames unless you enjoy crispy toast, like using stones and clay and even a cabbage leaf or two to fake the warmth modern people think is normal. You glance at the fire again. It's growing now, crackling cheerfully. A flame is a mood lifter in any century. You catch yourself smiling. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, you've got a clay ball, warm stones, 2 fewer frostbitten fingers than last year, and a cabbage foot wrap in reserve. Not bad, really, not bad at all. You slide the heavy wooden bar back and step out into the yard, if you can call a patch of frozen mud, straw, and livestock droppings a yard. The wind greets you with a slap to the face. You blink, then squint toward the byre, where your cow, Matilda, lowed just a moment ago. She's awake, and probably cold too. You wrap your cloak tighter and trudge across the hardened ground, boots crunching on frost. There's a sheen of ice over the trough. The breath from your nostrils floats like ghostly ribbons in front of you. You glance up at the sky as a bleak, iron-gray slab. No sun, no hope, just a sullen promise that the chill will not break today. But Matilda needs feeding, and more importantly, you need her warm body. You step inside the byre, and a wave of warmth hits you, and not heat, per se, but warmth compared to the outside. A few degrees can feel like a miracle. Matilda huffs softly. You scratch behind her ears, murmuring nonsense. She answers with a flick of the ear and a tail swat that just misses your knee. In medieval Europe, sleeping with livestock wasn't just an act of desperation, it was common practice. Cows, pigs, even chickens all lived under the same roof or in adjacent rooms. Their body heat was precious. Some homes were specifically designed to share walls between human quarters and animal stalls. The warmth from a cow could make the difference between shivering and sleeping. You settle into the straw beside Matilda, back against her flank. She radiates steady, quiet heat. You rest your hands on her hide and close your eyes for a moment. The smell isn't exactly perfumey, there's dung, hay, the sour tang of old milk, but it's familiar, and weirdly, it's comforting, like a wool blanket for your nose. Quirky fact: pigs were sometimes referred to as medieval radiators. Families would let them sleep in sedia, small ones especially, and tuck them in beside children. You once saw a piglet wearing a wool sweater. You're not sure who knitted it, but you're convinced they deserve sainthood. Matilda shifts, hooves scraping gently against the wooden floor. You offer her a handful of grain from your pouch, and she licks it up with that giant, sandpapery tongue. You've shared worse breakfasts. There's a rhythm to the barney's soft snorts, the occasional creak of beams, the rustle of hay. You lean against her and exhale, watching your breath melt into the warm animal fog. Your boots are damp again, your gloves thin, but sitting beside a 1,000-pound bovine furnace somehow makes everything seem survivable. Historians still debate whether sharing quarters with animals had more to do with warmth or practicality. Some argue it was for manure collection, or security. Others say it was about creating a microclimate in an otherwise unforgiving home. You figure it's all of the above: warmth, dung, and moo-powered comfort. There's a chicken roosting in the rafters above. You don't trust her. She's been giving you the side eye ever since you stole her eggs last week. You nod respectfully, just in case she's some kind of reincarnated saint. You hear a soft clatter from the far corner. Probably a rat, maybe a ghost. Honestly, you're too tired to care. You tuck your knees under your cloak, breathe in the hay-dusty air, and feel a strange peace settle over you. This is the medieval version of a heated blanket and Netflix. It's quiet, it's relatively warm, and it smells like cow. Your neighbor once told you that her father used to swear by sleeping in the barn during deep winter nights. Said it added 3 years to his life. He also said he once wrestled a bear, so broken bar grain of salt. Still, you can't deny the effectiveness. You rest your head against the stall wall and let yourself drift, not fully asleep or just that middle place, where time slips sideways and you forget your toes hurt. Outside, the wind picks up again. You hear the trees swaying, branches clattering like bones. But inside, Matilda chews her cud. The pig in the next stall snorts and shifts, creating a fart that reverberates off the wooden planks like a drum roll. You smile, because of course, your breath warms the space between your knees. You close your eyes, just for a moment. You may not have furs, or a feather bed, or anything remotely resembling luxury, but you have Matilda, and tonight, that's enough. You're jolted awake not by the cold this time, but by the bella, a deep, groaning toll that rolls across the village like a slow wave of sorrow. You blink in the half-light. Morning again? No, the shadows are too long. It's somewhere in that gray in-between when time feels heavy. You sit up, brush hay from your cloak, and listen. Only a broken bar, a broken bar, 3, a broken bar. Then silence. You know what 3 chimes means. Someone died last night. You don't move right away. Nobody does. In medieval villages, death isn't dramatic, it's routine, but it still sinks into your bones like a chill, especially when it comes midwinter. You can feel it in the way Matilda huffs quietly, the way the wind stills outside for just a moment, respectful and cruel. You finally stand, bones stiff, straw sticking to your clothes. You push open the byre door, and the village greets you with silence, the kind that only comes after a loss. There's smoke from a dozen chimneys, but no voices, just the echo of that bell. 3 chimes, a man. You scan the snow-dusted roofs. It could be anyone. Old Bertil, who hasn't left his house since October. Young Emmerich, who'd been coughing up red last week. Or someone who seemed fine yesterday but simply didn't wake up. The cold doesn't always give warning. Historians agree that winter mortality rates among peasants were brutally high, especially for the old and the very young. With low nutrition, high exposure, and few medical remedies beyond prayer and hope, people simply slipped away in the night, sometimes in their sleep, sometimes with a gasp and a prayer, sometimes alone, and sometimes, you didn't find them until the fire went out and no one came to relight it. You trudge toward the center of the village. Already, a few others have gathered. The somber, quiet, not crying but subdued. No one asks who it was. You'll know soon enough. You think about the man who taught you to mend a fence with only a hammer and hope, or the one who lent you a turnip last spring. You hope it wasn't him, but then again, you hope it wasn't anyone. And then you see the blanket-covered form being carried down the hill on a stretcher cobbled from planks and rope. It was old Bertil. You bow your head. A quirky piece of lore says that if someone dies in winter and isn't properly mourned, their spirit gets trapped in the frost, wandering through the fields, whispering into chimneys, blowing out candles. Your grandmother swore by it. She used to say, "Don't forget to weep, or the dead might forget they're dead." You believed her then. Some part of you still does. The bell chimes once more as the body is laid in the chapel's stone threshold. It's unheated, Of course colder inside than out, but it's sacred. That counts for something. You linger just outside, cloak pulled tight, snow settling on your shoulders like ash. Inside, the priest mutters prayers. Not Latin, not really, more like a song that's half remembered and half invented. You've heard it before, you'll hear it again. Historians still debate how deep Christianity really reached into peasant life. Some say villagers clung more to folk customs, that the church was a distant institution only visited for marriage and funerals. Others argue that faith was woven into every breath, every snowfall, every sneeze, every whispered God willing. You think both are true, depends on the day, and the weather. The barrow will wait. The ground is too frozen to dig, so they'll lay him in the crypt, or what passes for only basically a stone shed with thick walls and a holy charm carved above the door. He'll rest there until the thaw. Someone hands you a bit of cloth, and you pass it on. Someone else whispers a prayer. The crowd begins to disperse. There's no dramatic weeping, no collapse into snowbanks. Just quiet nods and slow steps. Life must go on. The cows need milking. The wood needs chopping. The fire, always, needs tending. You walk home slower than usual. The cold feels different now. Less sharp, more a broken bar heavy, like it knows something you don't. You reach your house, duck inside, and close the door behind you. The fire's still lit. Your siblings are awake, faces sleepy but curious. You shake your head once. No need to say more. They understand. You take a moment by the hearth, rubbing your hands together. The clay ball is still warm, the porridge is still edible, and you are still here, still breathing, still surviving. Sometimes, that's the only thing you can do. The fire's low again. No surprise there. You drop to your knees, groaning like an old floorboard, and start prodding it with your iron poker. A little spark, a little whisper of warmth. That's all it takes to start again. You look around the room, a blanket draped over chairs, cloaks drying by the wall, and a small pile of wood that was definitely taller yesterday. You've been burning through it faster than you'd like. You'll need more soon, but not tonight. Tonight, you've got something else in mind. You tug on your boots, wrap yourself in your warmest cloak, and slip quietly out the door. The night is sharp. The stars look like tiny shattered mirrors. Your breath hangs in the air like it's too cold to fall. You head across the frozen yard, past the empty chicken coop, and toward the old path behind the thatch roof homes. There's no reason to go out in the dark, which is exactly why people do. Sometimes you just need a broken bar, other humans. Warmth isn't always about fire, it's about company, too. A neighbor's hearth, a mug of ale, a few whispered stories, and maybe, if you're lucky, something stronger than stew in your bowl. This isn't officially allowed. You're not supposed to visit others after curfew, but everyone does, at least the ones still awake. The unspoken rule is, don't get caught, don't be allowed, and always bring something to share. Tonight, you've got a lump of stale cheese, an onion, and what might be half a turnip. It's not much, but it's enough. You knock on gently on your friend's door. A pause, then a crack opens, warm light spilling out. A face appears, grinning. You again. You grin back. You got ale? Better, I've got soup. You step inside, and instantly the cold drops off your shoulders like a wet cloak. The house smells of onions, boiled meat, and firewood. There's laughter, low and quiet. A few others are already gathered, cloaks steaming near the hearth. Someone's playing a bone flute out terribly, but with enthusiasm. Someone else has a jug. You sit down, your bowl is filled, and you let the warmth of the room seep into you. Here, in this secret little circle, winter doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like a reason to come together. Mainstream historians often focus on the grim isolation of medieval peasant life. But the truth is, community was survival. No one got through winter alone. You borrowed, you bartered, you shared what you had, and sometimes, you just needed to laugh at something dumb, like that story about the goat that fell into the village well. He's fine, mostly. You sip something vaguely alcoholic from a wooden cup. It burns. You like it. The conversation rolls. People speak in hushed tone not because of fear, but because quiet feels sacred when it's earned. Someone tells a joke about a priest and a turnip. Someone else complains about their frozen laundry breaking in half. A third person insists they saw a witch by the edge of the forest. You all nod solemnly because of course someone saw a witch. It's winter. Quirky detail: in some villages, it was believed that witches could steal warmth, literally take the heat from your hearth and carry it away in a jar. That's why some people kept protective herbs hanging above their fireplaces, or drew strange runes into the soot. You reach up and touch the little charm hanging near the hearth area, bent nail wrapped in red thread. The family swears it wards off frost spirits. You don't question it. Historians still debate how superstitious peasants really were. Some claim the rituals were performative, ways to feel in control of chaos. Others suggest that belief wasn't separate from life, it was life. You don't see the point of the argument. If hanging a nail in red thread means your fire keeps burning, why not? Someone passes a crust of bread your way, you tear it in half and offer some to the person beside you. That's the way. Always share. It's not about generosity, it's about reciprocity. You warm my bones tonight, I help fix your roof next week. Everyone plays a part. The soup's not amazing, but it's hot. And right now, that's enough to make you smile. You lean back, stretch your legs toward the fire, and soak in the moment. Outside, the cold howls. Inside, someone sneezes. Someone laughs. Someone sings a fragment of a song that might be a lullaby or a drinking chant, and no one's sure anymore. You sip again. You thaw. Not just in body, but in spirit. Eventually, someone nudges you. We should go soon. You nod. Lingering too long risks attention, and nobody wants the village priest ranting about night wanderers and hearth sins. You gather your things, exchange a quiet farewell, and step back out into the icy air. The cold hits again, but this time, it doesn't feel so sharp. Not with soup in your belly, warmth on your skin, and someone's off-key song still playing in your head. You walk home slowly, boots crunching rhythmically in the snow, breath steady. The fire inside your house will need tending again. Your bed will be crowded. Your cloak still smells like cow and onion. But tonight, you carry a different kind of warmth, the kind that comes from company, and maybe from that third cup of whatever it was. You wake groggy, with the distinct feeling that your brain is wrapped in a thin layer of wool, not the cozy kinda, more like the scratchy leftover scraps used to stuff a pillow when the feathers run out. Your mouth is dry, your stomach ice, a broken bar, uncertain. That soup last night? Maybe not the best idea. But there's no time to nurse regrets. The day's begun, and you're already behind. The cold greets you immediately. It's less of a good morning and more of a punch to the nose. You pull your cloak tighter, grab your wooden bowl, and shuffle toward the pot hanging over the fire. There's something bubbling inside, but calling it food might be optimistic. It's more like a broken bar, a beige mystery. You give it a stir. Grain, onion, water, maybe a hint of dried peas if you're lucky. The consistency is somewhere between glue and regret, but this is what keeps you going. In the medieval peasant world, meals in winter were less about satisfaction and more about endurance. You ate what was available, and what was available wasn't much. Root vegetables, stored grain, maybe dried beans if the harvest had been kind. No fresh produce. No meat unless an animal had died recently. No sugar, no spice. Unless, of course, you're one of the lucky few with access to ale. You lift the small jug beside the hearth and take a tentative sip. Flat, cloudy, slightly sour. Perfect. Ale wasn't a luxury, it was a staple, often safer to drink than water. It was brewed weak enough for daily consumption, including by children. It filled your belly, gave you a bit of energy, and dulled the cold just enough to make it tolerable. You hand the jug to your sister, who gulps it like it's her birthright. Easy, you mumble. We still need it for tonight. She wipes her mouth and grins, ale foam on her lip like a medieval milk mustache. You sit by the fire and scoop porridge into your bowl. It's hot, and that's the best thing you can say about it. You chew slowly, each bite less about flavor and more about obligation. The dog eyes you from across the room. You toss her a crust. She deserves it more than you do. Mainstream historians agree that peasant diets were shockingly monotonous, especially in winter. Bread, gruel, and ale made up the bulk of daily intake. Occasionally, salted or smoked meat would make an appearance, but only if you were lucky. Clever, or shameless enough to trade for it. And don't get started on hunger, because when the stores ran low, and they always ran low, your body reminded you just how long winter could last. That gnawing in your belly wasn't just discomfort, it was a quiet, persistent warning. If you run out of food, you run out of time. You remember the winter 2 years ago, when the root cellar flooded and half the village's grains boiled. People tried eating acorn paste, boiled bark, even shoe leather. You were spared most of it. Your family had barter credit with the miller, but others weren't so lucky. You saw someone dig up a dead chicken and try to salvage it. You don't think about that much, but sometimes, when the porridge tastes especially bland, your mind goes there. A quirky tidbit: in some villages, people believed that eating onions raw at sunrise would ward off frostbite. You tried it once. Your breath cleared a room. But hey, your toes stayed pink. You slurp the last of your breakfast and set the bowl aside. It clinks softly on the hearthstone. Around you, others begin to stir. Your uncle stretches with a groan. Your mother pulls on her boots. Even the dog shifts to a more dramatic position, as if to say, "Yes, I too carry burdens." It's nearly time to head out for firewood. You hate that part, not just the cold, but the effort, the trudge, the aching arms and splinters and icy bark that refuses to split. But you need fuel. No wood, no fire, no warmth, no you. You grab your cloak again and open the door. The wind bites, sharp and merciless. The ground crunches. Snow has fallen again. You stare out across the village, already busy with movement. A woman hauling a bucket to the well, 2 boys chasing a chicken through the frost, a man dragging a sled piled high with logs. It's life. Thin, difficult, repetitive, but life. And as you step out, jug in one hand, axe in the other, you remind yourself of something your grandfather used to say: gruel doesn't taste good, but it tastes better than death. You believed him then. You believe him now. The wind hasn't let up all day. It slices through your cloak like it's made of paper and gets into places no draft has any business being. You'd curse it, but your jaw is too numb to move properly, so you just think very loud, angry thoughts in its general direction. You're back from hauling wood. Your arms ache, your fingers sting, and your nose has been running for so long it deserves its own title. But you've done it. The firewood pile is stacked again, lopsided, sure, but it'll burn. You drop your axe just inside the door and collapse near the hearth, letting the heat creep slowly back into your limbs. Your sister hands you a piece of bread, a dry, hard, slightly burned, and you eat it like it's cake. Then you cough for 5 minutes because it's also dusty. But then she adds something else to your bowl, a dollop of something greenish. You pause. What a broken bar is this? She grins. Chest salve, with sage and pig fat, for your cough. You eye it suspiciously. Looks like something scraped off the back of a cow. Smells better, she says. It doesn't, but you smear a bit on your chest anyway because, well, a broken bar, what else are you going to do? This is winter medicine, peasant edition. No apothecaries here, just herb women, old wives' tales, and sheer hope. Your family has a few dried herbs hanging from the rafters: nettle, mugwort, chamomile, and every now and then, someone makes a tea or a poultice and hopes for the best. You once had a fever so bad they wrapped you in damp cloth and put hot stones at your feet. You either sweated it out or nearly drowned in your own blankets. Hard to tell, but you lived. Mainstream history confirms that medical care in medieval villages was, shall we say, rustic. If you were lucky, someone nearby knew a bit about herbs. If you weren't lucky, someone nearby knew a bit about leeches. And then there were the traveling healers, a mystery folk who claimed to have miracle cures, usually involving crushed beetles, powdered bones, or extremely suspicious mushrooms. You saw one once. His hair was shaped like a beehive and he kept trying to sell rat parts as talismanic curatives. Your mother threw a turnip at him. Good times. Quirky healing tidbit. Some villagers swore by urine therapy. Yes, you heard right. Drinking a cup of your own well. You get the idea. Was considered a treatment for coughs and fevers. You don't care how cold it gets. That's where you draw the line. As night falls, the wind whistles like a ghost through the walls again. You add more wood to the fire and check the herbs drying above. Some are nearly ready to grind. You fetch the mortar and pestle and start to work, releasing familiar smells, bitter, earthy, slightly sweet. Your cousin wanders over, sniffling. You hand him a mug of onion and honey tea. He sips it and makes a face like he's dying. "Drink it," you say, "or cough yourself to pieces." He glares, but drinks. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants believed more in science or superstition when it came to illness, but really, it wasn't either. Or, you did both. You boiled herbs and muttered prayers. You rubbed garlic on your feet and hung charms from the rafters. You didn't care why something worked, just that it did. You remember the tale of the man who rubbed goose fat on his chest and then wrapped himself in nettles. Said it cured his pneumonia. Also said it made him hallucinate flying pigs. The village still tells that one. Your aunt tried to exorcise a fever once. She rang a bell over her son's head, shouted at the illness to get thee gone, and then whacked the bedpost with a stick. Did it work? Hard to say, but the fever broke, and the bed's never been the same. You finish grinding the herbs and mix them with a bit of warm lard. It's messy, smells like a barn on fire, but you smear some on your chest just the same. At this point, you'd rub yourself with dragon spit if it meant sleeping through the night without coughing. You lie back, head resting on a lumpy pillow stuffed with straw and old regrets, and let the firelight flicker across your face. The room smells like smoke and pig fat and thyme. It's weirdly comforting. The dog flops down beside you with a dramatic sigh, as if she too has had a hard day of not being useful. You reach out and pat her head. "You'll live," you whisper. You hope the same for yourself, because the cold won't kill you tonight, and not if you've got fire, herbs, a little ale, and maybe a handful of pig grease. Modern medicine this is not, but it's what you've got, and sometimes, that's enough. You wake to the sound of coughing, and not yours this time, it's your grandmother. The cough is dry, raspy, and persistent. You listen in the dark, motionless beneath your layers of wool and straw, counting the gaps between each harsh breath. It's worse than yesterday. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb your cousin curled beside you like a bread roll. The fire is nothing but ash now. The room is cold enough to see your breath again. You wrap yourself tightly and shuffle toward her. She's awake, staring at the ceiling beams with that distant look old people get when they're not quite here anymore. "Tea?" you whisper. She nods slightly. You make it from the last of the elderflowers and a pinch of dried mint a week, but hot. When you bring it to her lips, her hands tremble. You steady the cup and watch her sip. She exhales like it's a relief and leans back, eyes half closed. Her skin feels like thin parchment warmed by candlelight. This is the part no one tells you about, choosing who gets the warmth. You only have so many blankets, so much wood, so much food. In the coldest weeks of winter, you triage your own family, deciding who gets the extra scoop of soup, who sleeps nearest the fire, who wears the least mended cloak. And it's never easy. Your youngest sibling, barely 5, has been coughing too. So has your uncle, but the oldest go first. That's the rule, or the myth, or the curse. You drape your own cloak over your grandmother and pull the bench closer to the hearth. You'll sleep near the door tonight. She needs the heat more than you do. Historians agree that resource rationing in winter was often brutally pragmatic. In some villages, when food ran too low, the weakest were encouraged to take smaller portions. Some say it was mercy, others say it was math, and some say it was simply survival. You're not sure what to call it, but it's happening right now, in your own home. A quirky custom? In a few rural regions, it was believed that sacrificing warmth to an elder brought good luck or at least postponed your own misfortune. People would put the best blanket over the sickest person, even if it meant everyone else froze. It wasn't selflessness, it was bargaining. You stoke the fire with a piece of bark you'd been saving. It catches quickly, sending out a little burst of light that paints your grandmother's face in gold. She looks younger in the glow, softer, but when the light shifts, you see it again of that edge of bone under skin, that faint crackling in her chest. You pretend not to notice. She speaks after a while, voice thin and dry. "Do you remember the winter of the 3 graves?" You nod. Everyone remembers that one. 3 deaths in 1 week. The ground was so hard the bodies had to be stored in the grain house until spring. You were 9. You still remember the smell. "They put me near the fire every night," she says, smiling faintly. "Didn't say why, but I knew." You smile back, but your chest tightens. "Why did they do it?" you ask. "Because I could still tell stories," she says. You want to ask what stories, but she's already drifting again, eyes closing, breath slowing. You cover her hands with yours. They're cold. Later, your mother returns from the woods, arms loaded with sticks, and eyes you both carefully. No words, just a nod. She adds more wood to the fire and ladles out something hot and watery for everyone. Tonight, there's no complaining about the taste. Your younger brother tugs your sleeve. Is Gran going to die? You hesitate. Not tonight, you say. It's not a lie. Yet, you feed the fire until the room glows again. You wrap another cloth around your grandmother's feet. You shoo the dog away when she tries to lie too close. This spot is taken. You chew stale bread and taste none of it. You think about how spring will come, eventually, how the snow will melt and the trees will bloom and your grandmother might sit in the doorway again, sun on her face, telling that one story about the goose that saved a wedding. But tonight, it's just flame and silence and choices you never wanted to make. You curl up on the bench, shivering, and whisper a promise to the rafters. If you take her, take me too. The wind knocks against the shutters like a quiet answer. Morning slips in not with sunlight, but with a slightly paler shade of gray seeping through the shutters. Your joints ache. Your mouth tastes like burnt bread. You reach instinctively toward the hearth, already dreading what you'll find. But the fiery miracle of Merklessa is still smoldering, just aglow, barely breathing, but alive. Like hope, or spite, you take it either way. You rise stiffly, knees crackling, and begin the now familiar dance. Stir the ash, blow gently, feed the ember, coax the flame. The fire rewards you with a slow flicker, reluctant but real. You smile. It's the kind of victory no one celebrates but everyone needs. Behind you, your grandmother is still breathing. You check without making it obvious. Her chest rises slowly. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Outside, the wind has stilled. For now, the village is quiet, but not dead. That soft kind of quiet when everything is focused on surviving, not talking. You open the door and step into the yard. The cold bites your nose, but the air smells different, cleaner, almost bearable. And there, barely visible through the frost-laced grass, are footprints. Small, child-sized, zigzagging toward the commons. Your neighbor's kids. Of course, you trudge after them, past half-frozen fences and shuttered windows. As you approach the square, you see it, a pile of greenery, bundled high and stacked like treasure. Evergreens, ivy, holly all arranged around a towering pyre of wood. And at the center, a straw effigy. It's festival day. Yes. In the middle of all this cold and struggle and quiet grief, your village is throwing a party, sort of. Not a feast, there's not enough for that. Not a celebration, no one has the energy. But a fire, a ritual, a gathering. Because sometimes, joy is defiance. It's called midwinter light, or sun wake, or the burning of the old year, depending on which part of the kingdom you're from. Historians still argue whether these fire festivals were remnants of pagan rites or clever church-sanctioned excuses to distract people from how depressing February is. You don't care either way. You're just glad something is happening. Villagers arrive in slow clumps, cloaked and bundled, carrying sticks, herbs, even a few scraps of bread to toss into the fire, a few bang pots. One woman claps slowly, rhythmically. Children dance circles, laughing in breathy puffs of steam. It's not loud, it's not even cheerful in the usual sense, but it's alive. You find your spot and sit on an overturned bucket. A warm rock would have been nicer, but you're not picky. Someone passes you a small chunk of roasted rooted turnip, maybe, or a very confused apple. You eat it anyway. The fire is lit with ceremony. The eldest woman in the village strikes the flint. As always, she's nearly blind, but her hands never miss. When the flame takes, the crowd lets out a sound, and not quite a cheer, more like a sigh in unison, a little release, a shared breath. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, they'd write wishessa or grudgessa on bits of parchment and toss them into the flames. Others whispered their hopes directly into the smoke, believing it would carry their words skyward. You tried it once, years ago, asked for an extra egg at breakfast. It worked. Coincidence? Probably, but you never stopped believing a little. You pull your cloak tighter and lean into the heat as the bonfire growls. The straw effigy begins to curl and blacken. Someone sings an old song, half forgotten. Others hum along. And there it I sit, that feeling, warmth, not from fire, but from people. It's rare, but unmistakable, the kind that glows in your chest, even as your toes remain numb. You look around at the faces, wrinkled, wind-burned, gap-toothed, soot-smeared, smiling. Every single one of them knows the cold. Every single one of them knows the cost of surviving it. But tonight, for a few precious hours, they've chosen joy. You get up, stretch, and toss a twig into the flames. You don't whisper anything, just a nod, a quiet thanks. Then you hear your grandmother hobbling slowly down the path with your uncle on one side and your sister on the other. She's wrapped in every blanket you own. She looks like a moving hay bale. You rush to meet her. You're up, she grins, gaps and all, not dead yet. You offer her your seat, but she waves you off and plants herself near the fire like a queen reclaiming her throne. Her eyes reflect the flames, and for a moment, she doesn't look frail at all. Someone hands her a cup of warm broth. She nods, sips, and smacks her lips like it's wine. You sit beside her, shoulder to shoulder, watching the fire dance. The cold is still here, biting at the edges, reminding you it hasn't left. But tonight, it doesn't feel like it's winning. Not with your grandmother alive, not with the village singing, not with the fire roaring high, daring the winter to try again. Later that night, long after the last ember of the bonfire dies and the singing fades into quiet murmurs, you walk home through the frost-blanketed dark. Your boots crunch over frozen mud. The stars above are bright and unblinking, cold witnesses to your little world below. Your cloak smells like wood smoke, stew, and just a hint of pine. You like it. The door creaks as you push it open. The warmth inside hits you gently, less a wave, more a whisper. The hearth is still lit, tended by your sister. She gives you a nod, then yawns and crawls under the covers beside your cousins. Your grandmother's already asleep, bundled so thickly she barely looks human. You check her breathing, still slow, still steady. You let yourself exhale. The fire crackles as you add another log. It's dry and old, left over from autumn. You'd been saving it for a special moment. You decide this counts. You settle in beside the hearth, hands outstretched, letting the heat bring life back into your fingers. Around you, the house breathes. The dog shifts in her sleep. A mouse skitters behind the grain sack. Somewhere in the beams above, something tiny snores, probably Bernard's grandchildren. The cold lingers, of course. It always does. But tonight, it seems a broken bar softer. Not because the temperature has changed, but because you've survived another brutal stretch. You've kept the fire going, kept your family alive, kept yourself from unraveling. That's no small thing. You pull the last blanket around your shoulders and lean your head against the rough wood of the hearth's edge. Your eyes flutter shut, but your thoughts keep moving. You think of spring, of green shoots poking through mud, of wet earth and warm sun, and the first day you won't need 6 layers to pee outside. You smile. It's the kind of dream that's almost believable now. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants understood the turning of the seasons in scientific terms, or whether they simply felt it in their bones. But you know this, when you've survived enough winters, hope is a kind of knowledge. You shift again, eyes closing for real now. One final quirky belief floats into your mind, that if you fall asleep while staring at a healthy fire, you'll dream of the person you'll marry. You stare at the flames for a moment, smile to yourself, then let your eyes slip shut. You're not thinking about marriage, though. You're just thinking about tomorrow, about the chores, the woodpile, the stubborn pig that keeps escaping its pen, about porridge, about warmth. And you're thinking, maybe, just maybe, you'll get a full night's sleep. The fire's low now, just embers, glowing red dots in the dark, like eyes half closed with sleep. You shift under the blanket, your breath slowing, your limbs heavy and warm, the sounds around your soft gentle breathing, the quiet creak of settling beams, the rhythmic tick of the dog's paw twitching in a dream. Even the wind outside has softened, its voice more lullaby than warning. You listen to it all and let it wash over you, like snow melting down your back, slow and harmless. The room fades into a warm haze. The straw mattress no longer scratches. The damp corners no longer matter. The fire is still there, and that's enough. You think of Matilda in the byre, curled in her own warmth. You think of your sister's snoring and your grandmother's steady breath. You think of bread, of clay bricks tucked into sheets, of shared bowls and shared stories, and you think of all the fires you've kept alive. Winter hasn't ended. It never does all at once. But something in the air has shifted. You can feel it in the way your muscles finally relax, in the way your mind stops rehearsing the next step, the next chore, the next struggle. Now, there's just the gentle, quiet hum of survival. You did it. You made it through the night. So let yourself rest. Let the fire hum its slow, ancient lullaby. Let the cold knock gently on the door, unanswered. You're warm. You're safe. And for now, that's everything. Hey guys, tonight we slip into the frostbitten world of medieval winter where the days are short, the nights are brutal, and your greatest weapon against the cold isn't fire or furs. It's desperation mixed with creativity. You're a medieval peasant, and winter has settled over the village like a heavy wool blanket soaked in sleet. Your breath fogs the air before you even open your eyes. The thatched roof above your head is rimmed with frost, and the hay-stuffed mattress beneath you isn't doing much besides adding a few new bites to your collection. You blink in the dim gray light sneaking through the wooden shutter, and yep, you can see your own breath. Again, you pull your patched woolen blanket tighter, but that won't do much. The hearth fire burned down to a few glowing coals during the night, and unless someone risks frostbite to stir it back to life, you'll be dressing in sub-zero temperatures, which you are, because you're you. And comfort is for nobles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know who's listening, and from what corner of the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot across the cold-packed earth floor. A stone is for castles, not your humble huta, and toss a few sticks and dung patties onto the coals. The smell is memorable, but it sparks a flame, and suddenly there's life in the room again. This hut is your whole world. You live, eat, sleep, and survive here with your family and maybe a chicken or three. There's no insulation. The walls are wattle and daga wooden sticks woven and smeared with clay and manure. The roof is thatched with straw. It leaks, it sags, it houses more bugs than your bed. But it's yours. Some mornings you wake up with snow on the inside of the roof. Wind has this rude habit of sneaking in through every crevice. Medieval drafts don't just chill you, oh they whisper, you probably won't survive this. So, how do you fight back? You layer like your life depends on it, because it does. First, the linen shift, which is the one cleanish garment you try not to think about too much. Then a rough wool tunic, if you're lucky, and maybe another over that. The poor man's philosophy of winter wear is simple: wear everything you own, even if you look like a sack of barley tied with twine. And let's not forget your legs. You wrap them in thick woolen hose that itch worse than fleas in a summer haystack. You might even tie spare rags around your feet if your shoes are scraps of leather held together by hope you aren't cutting it anymore. Medieval peasants didn't have thermal underwear, but they understood one trick modern campers still use: shared heat. You and your family pile together like hibernating animals. Children, parents, grandparents, all squished into a pile of straw bedding near the hearth. You might complain about someone's elbow in your ribs, but that's better than losing a toe to frostbite. Now, historians still argue whether peasants truly lived in these constant, communal sleeping arrangements year-round or just in winter. But the evidence leans toward one truth: when the cold hit, dignity died quietly in the corner, right next to the turnip bin. And yet, amid all this, there were glimmers of warmth, the literal and metaphorical. Some clever folk stuffed walls with moss or wool scraps to trap in heat. Others hung heavy cloth over doorways like primitive insulation. One chronicler even claimed villagers in the alpine regions pressed warm bread to their feet before bed. Was it true? Or just the world's first comfort food prank? Scholars still debate that too. Fringe beliefs existed, too. In some German villages, it was thought that putting a broom upside down in the corner would sweep away the cold spirits. Superstitions and warmth went hand in hand, because frankly, if rubbing garlic on your windowsill made you feel cozier, who was going to argue? And then there's the weather itself. You think modern winters are bad? Try surviving during the Little Ice Age, a period of unusual cold that plagued Europe from the 14th to 19th centuries. Crops failed, prices rose, and winter stretched on like a bad dream. If you didn't freeze, you starved or both. But you're a survivor. You've made it through another night, and as the fire finally catches, you hover your hands over it like a pilgrim at a miracle. There's just enough heat to keep moving, just enough hope to get dressed. And today, like every winter day, your number one goal isn't glory or wealth, it's staying warm enough to see spring. You wrap your itchy woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, trying not to wince as it scratches your neck for the 10th time this morning. Welcome to the medieval wardrobia where comfort was sacrificed long ago on the altar of not freezing to death. There's no fashion week in your village, but if there were, the runway would feature 10 different variations of cold and desperate. Your outer layer is a thick woolen tunic, probably passed down from your grandfather and repaired with mismatched thread more times than you can count. Beneath it, a patched-up linen shirt hugs your skin. If you're lucky, you've got a second tunic. If you're truly blessed, that one isn't riddled with fleas. Your legs, wrapped in hose made of scratchy wool, stitched together by someone who clearly hated knees. They sag at the ankles and bunch up behind the thighs, less like pants, more like deflated bagpipes. You tighten the cloth laces holding them up and consider whether adding extra straw under your tunic would be worth the poking. You look to your feet. Shoes might be a generous word. These are chunks of leather tied with strips of hide, sometimes stuffed with dry moss or old cloth for warmth. If the weather's bad, you double wrap them with rags. They squeak when you walk, less from moisture and more from shame. Even your hat is homemade. You might be wearing a woolen coif or hood, sometimes lined with rabbit fur if your snares were kind this year. Historians still argue whether peasants regularly used animal skins as lining or just on special occasions. But you don't care. You'd wear a badger if it meant warmer ears. The truth is, layering wasn't just about heat, it was a form of insulation born from pure necessity. Clothes weren't changed daily or even weekly. You wore them until the smell could walk on its own, and even then, you hesitated because washing clothes meant risking wet garments in the cold. And wet wool smells like betrayal. There were no closets, no drawers, no fresh pairs of socks for every mood. Your entire wardrobe probably fit in a wooden chest shared, of course, with your siblings. If you wanted something warmer, you made it yourself. That meant spinning wool, weaving fabric, and sewing by hand, often by firelight with fingers already numb from the cold. If that sounds romantic, it's only because you're imagining it with background music and not the constant sniffles and swearing. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some peasants stuffed their outer tunics with straw, not just for padding or makeshift armor, but for insulation, like a scarecrow, but colder and grumpier. It worked sort of. But the downside was that you rustled when you walked, like an angry sack of grain. And don't forget the lard. Yes, lard. In some regions, people would smear animal fat on exposed skin to protect against windburn. Think of it as medieval Vaseline, if Vaseline smelled like bacon and invited wolves. Now, the nobles had it better. Of course they did. They had fur-lined robes, silk undergarments, and fireplaces in every room. Meanwhile, you're grateful just to own a second belt. The class divide in medieval clothing was so stark, it was literally regulated by law. Sumptuary laws forbade lower classes from wearing certain colors or fabrics. Want to wear velvet? Too bad. That's a jail sentence. Peasant. Still, the community helped. Villagers shared clothing, handed down tunics, mended each other's cloaks. A good woolen overcoat was a treasury, and if someone died, it was silently understood that their best garment would be passed on, not buried. That cloak might keep someone alive for another season. And while the layers helped during the day, night was a different beast. When you stripped down even slightly to sleep, the cold pounced, so you slept fully clothed, wrapped in your cloak like a medieval burrito, praying your body heat and 3 family members pressed against you would be enough. Modern thermals, dream on. This is survival couture, itchy, heavy, endlessly patched, and oh so necessary. So you walk out into the frostbitten morning, wrapped like a cabbage in wool and stubbornness. The wind cuts, but it doesn't pierce. Not yet, because as ridiculous as you'll like a walking laundry linear, you're warm. And in this world, warm means alive. You crouch low beside the hearth, your knees cracking like cold floorboards. The fire crackles lazily, more embers than flame, and your breath fogs in the air just above it. There's no chimney in this home, not because you're poor, though you are, but because chimneys haven't quite caught on for the likes of you yet. Not for peasants. Not in this century. Instead, the smoke curls upward through a hole in the roof. Sometimes, other times, it clings stubbornly to the rafters before slowly rolling down to meet your lungs. You cough. Everybody coughs. It's just part of being warm. These hearths aren't for show. They're not built to set the mood. They're survival devices. A small ring of stones, a pit if you're lucky, or just a bare patch of packed earth where firewood and dung cakes smolder through the night. No hearth means no food, no warmth, and no light, and no chance at seeing spring. Today, you poke the ashes with a stick and feed it more fuel, a mix of splintered kindling, peat moss, dried reeds, and those ever-faithful cow dung bricks. They burn longer than twigs, and smell worse than betrayal, but you stopped noticing the scent years ago. That's just what warm smells like now. You sit back and breathe in the smoke-heavy air. Your clothes, your hair, even your skin carries this scent. The whole house does. Every surface is stained with a thin layer of soot. When guests come by, air as that ice they leave looking a few shades darker. It's basically a peasant's version of spray tan. And here's where it gets really delightful. Without a chimney, the smoke doesn't just drift up, it lingers. Especially in winter, when that small opening in the thatched roof is iced over. Sometimes, you can't see across the room through the haze. And yet, somehow, this soup of smoke is comforting. It coats everything, even the cold. It's your invisible blanket. Historians still argue whether the smoke-choking method was a design flaw or a rustic benefit. Some suggest the smoke actually helped preserve the thatch, killing off insects and mold. Others argue it was just poor architecture. Either way, you're stuck with it. So, breathe deep, and try not to think about your lungs. But fire wasn't just for heat, it was for cooking. Always in the same pot, always over the same flame, and as it simmered and bubbled, it warmed the room in more ways than one. Most hearths were kept alive 24/7. Letting the fire die was a rookie mistake. Restarting it in freezing weather meant friction fiery, aka, the world's least fun cardio. If you did lose the flame, you begged a burning stick from a neighbor, wrapping it in wet cloth or moss to keep it alive until you reached home. No shame in that. It happened. The real shame was in admitting you let it go out in the first place. And speaking of heat, did you know some villagers used heated stones as primitive radiators? No joke. You'd toss a large rock into the fire, wait until it was piping hot, then wrap it in cloth and place it in your bedding or under your cloak. It wouldn't last all night, but it beat hugging your knees and crying. One quirky workaround that popped up in scattered regions: salt jars. Heavy pots filled with coarse salt were heated by the fire, then tucked into beds to release warmth slowly. Historians still debate whether this was widespread or just an odd luxury found in manor homes, but you've probably seen it, or heard of it. If your village gossips travel far, firelight also gave your eyes something to focus on. After the sun disappeared at 4 in the afternoon, and yes, in winter it really did vanish that early, the hearth became your only illumination. Its flickering glow told stories across the walls. It painted your mother's face in dancing shadows. It made your house feel alive, even when you weren't sure if you were. But the fire demanded respect. Accidents were common. Loose wool, dry straw, and too much smoke could turn your little hut into a smoky oven faster than you could scream for help. That's why your father always sat closest, always with an eye on the flames. The hearth was life, but it could also be death. Still, you and your family gather around it every night, not because it's a bonding ritual, but because it's the only warm place in the room. You eat there, sew there, tell stories there, you scrape bowls and sing old songs, and sometimes just sit in silence, soaking up the heat. It's not glamorous, it's not cozy, but it is survival. And as the fire hisses and pops, you throw on one more dung cake and smile, not because you like the smell, but because for now, at least, you're winning. The cold's still out there, clawing at the walls, but in here, you've got a fire. You roll onto your side, half asleep, your face pressed into a bundle of old cloth that used to be a tunic and is now your pillow. You're not alone, of course. You're never alone in winter, not unless you've committed a serious crime or you're wealthy enough to afford loneliness. Both are rare in your world. Instead, you're nestled in a pile of siblings, parents, maybe even a grandparent or two, squeezed onto a communal bed of straw, cloth, and hope. There's no my side of the bed. Every side is someone else's elbow, or knee, or questionable foot. In warmer months, you might spread out more, maybe even sleep separately. But now, it's winter, and winter makes rules. Rule 1. Everyone huddles. Rule 2. Body heat is sacred. The bed is a mess of wool cloaks, patched up linen sheets, and whatever softish materials you can find. Moss, feathers, goat hair, or anything that might trap a little warmth. You shift slightly, trying to avoid the cold patch near the edge. That's where the air leaks in, where the warmth dies. No one wants that spot. It's practically a punishment. Historians still argue whether this kind of communal sleeping was common across all villages or more specific to northern climates. Some claim peasants had individual beds. Others say those were mostly for show, or reserved for the head of the household. But your back knows the truth. You're in a body pile every night, and that's the only reason your toes are still attached. And let's be honest, it's not glamorous. Someone always snores, someone always kicks, and someone, always, without fail, lets out a sulphurous blast of warmth that nobody asked for. You try to laugh, quietly. It's better than crying, or shivering. Your little brother is wrapped around your arm like a barnacle. He's drooling. You can feel it, but you don't move, because if you do, you'll let the cold in. And in this room, cold is a predator always waiting for weakness. The house, if you can call it that, creaks in the wind, the thatch rustles, a distant owl hoots. But inside, wrapped in warmth and chaos, you rest. It's not comfort, it's containment. You're like peas in a steaming pot of exhaustion. There's a fringe theory among modern researchers that huddling like this helped regulate circadian rhythms, since the shared body heat and heartbeats provided a natural rhythm in the absence of sunlight or clocks. Is it true? Who knows? All you care about is that your mother's foot just found your shin again. In some regions, people took it a step further. The livestock came in too. Chickens in the corner, maybe a pig near the door. And, if you were truly serious about staying warm, the cow joined you. Yes, a full-grown cow, right inside the room. It sounds absurd until you remember that cows are warm, incredibly warm, and unlike humans, they don't complain much. A cow could heat up a small space just by standing in it. Add a few candles, a fire, and 7 relatives, and suddenly you're sweating under 5 layers of wool, wishing for just a tiny breeze. And sure, the smell was agricultural, but your nose adjusted. Mostly. Besides, the cow was family. She gave milk, heat, and the occasional side-eye if someone tried to steal her hay. She earned her spot by the hearth. This kind of communal warmth wasn't just practical, it was cultural. People understood that survival meant togetherness. Isolation was dangerous. Cold was a pack hunter, and you needed your herd. In fact, some folk rituals even revolved around the idea of shared warmth. In parts of Eastern Europe, it was believed that those who slept alone in winter might be taken by frost spirits, malevolent forces that slipped through cracks in the walls to claim the solitary. Was it superstition? Probably. But you weren't about to test it. And so, you shift again. Your arm's asleep, but at least you're not. You stare at the dark ceiling, its beams lost in shadow, and listen to the soft breathing around you. Someone coughs. Someone turns. A log shifts in the fire. The room glows faintly red, the last warmth of the coals reaching your toe. It's not quiet, it's not peaceful, but it's safe. The cold can't get in, and not tonight, not as long as you stick together. Tomorrow, you'll rise early, fetch water, mend shoes, chop wood. But for now, in this makeshift nest of elbows and snores, you rest, wrapped in wool and love and maybe a bit too much lard. You're warm. The morning air bites before your eyes even open. You shiver beneath the shared pile of cloaks and itchy wool, debating whether to brave the cold or pretend you're still asleep. But eventually, Natria, or your grandmother's elbow, nudges you into motion. You swing your legs out from the hay bed and brace yourself for the floor's cruel welcome. It's like stepping onto frozen iron. Today, your first task is simple but vital: breakfast. And by breakfast, we mean something hot. Not hot like a bakery croissant, but hot like a bubbling, murky pot of whatever you managed to scrape together yesterday. You shuffle toward the hearth. The fire's nearly out, again, but a few stubborn embers glow defiantly under the ash. You stir it with a poker or maybe the end of an old rakia and toss on a few twigs, hoping for flames. Then comes the next step in your daily survival ritual: heating rocks. Yes, rocks. You've got a small pile of hand-sized stones set near the fire. Not just for decoration, these are your secret weapons. You pick one up, rotate it in the heat until it's almost too hot to touch, then wrap it in cloth. This goes straight into your bedding or tucked into your tunic to fight off the morning chill. Congratulations, you've just created the medieval equivalent of a space heater. Some villagers swear by this trick, others prefer the pot trick. Fill a sealed clay jug with boiling water and nestle it beside you while you eat or sew. The warmth seeps out slowly, soothing your fingers and your frozen resolve. But the king of medieval winter remedies, hot ale. Now don't get excited, it's not exactly pub quality. It's probably thin, weak, and tastes vaguely like barn, but it's warm, and in this climate, that's better than flavor. You ladle it out from the pot where it's been sitting since yesterday, reheated with a few crumbled herbs, maybe a hint of sour apple or molasses if you're feeling fancy. And here's the quirky bit: some peasants believed hot ale had medicinal properties. A strong cup in the morning opened the veins, drove out bad spirits, and cured the cold in your bones. Historians still argue whether this was wishful thinking or if there was some truth to it, given the presence of trace nutrients and calories. Either way, it helps you feel warmer, and that's good enough. Some mornings, the ale's gone or the rocks are too cold, and you just mutter curses under your breath and deal with it. But when things go right, when you've got a steaming mug and a warm rock under your cloak, you almost feel rich. Almost. You cradle your mug and glance around the room. Your father's rubbing his hands over the flame. Your sister is wrapping a cloth around her feet. The cow, yes the cow, is snorting in the corner, her breath rising in soft clouds. You nod to her. She did a good job last night. Very warm, slightly smelly, but warm. And as the fire grows, you toss in a chunk of dried peat. It catches with a pop, and the room lights up orange for a moment. You can feel the change. It's subtle, but it matters. The kind of warmth that seeps into your skin and says, you might make it through today. Now, about the food. You lift the lid from the iron pot and give it a stir. Inside is a strange blend of barley, cabbage, old turnips, maybe a bone for flavor if the gods were kind. It's called pottage, and you've eaten it every day for as long as you can remember. But today you toss in a tiny pinch of salt. The luxury. You even have a leftover onion. You're basically a chef now. This pot stays on the fire all day. You add to it, stir it, skim off scum, and eat from it again and again. It never truly empties. It just evolves. Some say a good pottage never dies, it just changes shape, like a culinary phoenix made of raw vegetables. And there's a certain poetry to it, isn't there? This one humble pot, always warm, always waiting. It feeds you, warms your hands, fills the air with familiar smells. Even if it tastes like boiled disappointment, it's yours. It's fuel, it's life. Sometimes, you let the pot cook down until it thickens, then scoop the leftovers into cloth and tuck it under your cloak like a hot water bottle. Medieval innovation, right there. You can walk outside into the frost and carry lunch and warmth in the same bundle. There are days when nothing works. The fire won't catch, the stones crack from the cold, the ale goes sour, and yet, somehow, you find warmth in little ways, in sharing the last hot cup with your sister, or tucking a warm rag into your mother's boots. You didn't grow up with luxuries. You barely understand the idea of comfort. But here in the bitter winter of your life, you've mastered something far more important than elegance: resourcefulness. Because when the snow buries the fields and the wind cuts through bone, your survival doesn't depend on riches, it depends on hot stones, burnt ale, and a pot that never quite empties. You tug open the wooden door, really more of a warped plank on creaky hinges, and feel the icy morning air wrap around your ankles like a judgmental ghost. It's feeding time, but not just for you. You shuffle outside into the yard, boots half frozen, breath trailing like dragon smoke. And there she is, your most loyal winter ally, not a sibling, not a neighbor, but your cow. She's standing in the lean-to barn that barely qualifies as shelter, huffing impatient clouds of steam. Her eyes flick toward you as if to say, "About time." And frankly, she's right, because in the depths of winter, you need her as much as she needs you. It doesn't take long to throw down some hay, break the ice on the water bucket, and give her a good-natured pat. She's warm, really warm. Standing next to her is like leaning against a wood-burning stove, one that breathes and occasionally kicks you. And on the coldest nights, you bring her inside. Yes, inside your home. It's not glamorous, it's not clean, but it's effective. You clear a space near the hearth, lay down straw, and coax her in with a handful of oats or soft murmurs. And once she settles, once that 1,000 pound furnace of flesh curls her legs under and exhales, it's like flipping a switch in the room. Suddenly, it's warmer, quieter, safer. Historians still argue whether cows were commonly brought indoors or if this was limited to extreme regions. But plenty of records hint at it, especially in Scandinavian and alpine villages. One Norse saga even mentions sharing hearth and hay with kin and kine. Whether poetic or literal, it tells you something. Warmth was worth the smell, because yes, it smells, not like cinnamon and pine cones, like dung and damp fur. But in a world where death by cold is an annual visitor, a little stench is a small price to pay. And you're used to it. The walls already smell like smoke and people and moss. One more scent in the mix is just seasoning. The cow doesn't complain much. She gets a warm spot, maybe a scrap of root vegetable, and the occasional lullaby from your youngest sibling. Sometimes, when the wind howls and the fire dies down, her steady breathing is the only sound that keeps the dark at bay. There's something oddly comforting about Ida, this ancient bond between human and beast. You give her food and shelter. She gives you milk, heat, and a reminder that you're not alone in the struggle. Your neighbors do it too. It's a quiet understanding among peasants. We share everything, even warmth. Chickens sleep under benches, pigs curl up in corners. One family nearby has a goat that thinks it owns the hearth. No one's laughing because that goat's alive, and so are they. And it's not just warmth. Livestock inside the house serves as a crude alarm system. If some hyena or something tries to creep in during the night, the cow will know before you do. She'll snort, grunt, maybe even trample a few things in protest. Better a broken stool than a stolen winter stash. Here's a quirky twist. In some regions, it was believed that cows brought inside during winter would give richer milk come spring. Some said it was due to the warmth. Others claimed it was magic, a gift from the hearth spirits. Historians still debate that one, rolling their eyes, but secretly jotting it down just in case. You scratch her behind the ear and head back inside, your boots now crusted with frost and dung. You wipe them on the straw-stuffed mat by the door and step over the threshold. And there she follows, lumbering, slow, careful. Inside, the family scoots over, a new corner is rearranged. The cow settles with a sigh, the fire flickers, and for a moment, the house feels fuller, not just in smell, but in soul. You didn't choose this life, you were born into it. But there's a rough elegance to it all, a simplicity, a strange, unwritten pact between man and animal, stitched together by breath and bone and necessity. So tonight, when the wind howls again and the cold claws at the door, you'll pull your cloak tighter, curl beside your family and your cow, and whisper thanks, and not just to God or fire or fate, but to the humble creature now softly snoring by the hearth. Because in this world, a warm cow means one more day of life. You're stirring the pot again, not metaphorically. There's no drama to be had, unless you count the battle between parsnip chunks and a suspiciously ancient carrot, but literally, because in the center of the room, over that ever-flickering hearth, bubbles the heart of your winter, the eternal soup, the pottage. It's thick today, gloopy even, somewhere between a stew and a porridge, depending on how generous the last ladleful of barley was. And it smells edible, not amazing, but warm, which, in your current life, outranks taste, texture, and probably even basic nutrition. This isn't some fancy stew prepared fresh every day. This pot never truly empties. It's a living thing, a culinary organism. You add to it, you scrape from it, And sometimes you don't ask what's floating near the bottom. The broth gets deeper, the flavor murkier, but every bowl brings warmth. And that's all that matters. It's not just dinner, it's the house's central heating. You ladle out a few portions. Everyone gathers. The youngest gets the most broth. The elders get the softest vegetables. You being somewhere in the middle, you get the ladle with a bit of chew. Maybe a piece of dried pea, maybe a slice of turnip. Or if luck's on your side, a strip of salted pork fat that's been recycled through 3 meals already. Historians still argue how continuous these pots truly were. Some claim they were emptied and scrubbed every week. Others believe they simmered for months, taking on new flavors, new layers, new identities. Like a slow-cooked diary of hardship. Either way, you know this. You've eaten from this pot since before you could walk. And everyone adds something. A knob of stale bread to thicken it. A sprinkle of dried herbs. Some even crumble old cheese rinds into it, making a peasant's version of fondue minus the fond or the doux. Here's a fringe tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that a never-extinguished pot brought good luck. Letting it go empty was bad omen, an invitation for famine or frost spirits. Superstition? Maybe. But when the temperature dips below freezing and there's still a cup of warm soup in the pot, you don't take chances. You slurp quietly. It's hot, maybe too hot. You burn your tongue and say nothing. That's part of the ritual too. It wouldn't be dinner without a scorched taste bud or two. Then comes the second miracle of the eternal pottage, reuse. After dinner, the pot goes back on the fire. A splash of water, a few handfuls of grain, maybe someone digs up a buried cabbage. The cycle begins again. You feed it so it can feed you. A mutual agreement of survival. And it's not just food. That pot's heat radiates. You huddle around it, hands outstretched, feet nudging closer. Not too close, yes, someone always learns the hard way. You might even hover your damp socks above it, using cooking dinner as an excuse to dry your laundry. It becomes a place for gathering, for sharing rumors, for muttering prayers, for telling jokes so old even your grandfather rolls his eyes. The stories pour out like the soup is slow, meandering, warming from the inside. In fact, your village has a tradition. On the coldest nights, someone will stand and offer a tale as payment for their portion. A ghost story, a fable, a memory. The pot listens, the fire crackles, the cow grunts. You all lean in. Tonight, it's your uncle. He clears his throat and tells the tale of the monk who tried to brew beer in his soup pot and accidentally summoned the devil. It makes no sense, but the punchline lands. You laugh, you slurp, you live. Outside, the wind screeches across the thatch, the night thickens. But inside, the pot bubbles, always bubbling, like a steady heartbeat, or a lullaby made of onion and barley. And before bed, you do what your mother always does. You take a final ladleful, pour it into a small clay bowl, and set it near the fire, not to eat, to reheat tomorrow's start. Because survival doesn't begin with the sauna, it begins with what you managed to save from yesterday. You lie back, belly warm, eyes heavy, the scent of broth still clinging to your hair. You don't need riches, you don't need silverware, you just need the pot to keep bubbling. And tonight, it does. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and glance at your hands, chapped, raw, and red from the cold. Every knuckle stings. Your fingertips have forgotten what feeling feels like. But there's still work to do, and the sun hasn't even thought about rising. So, you reach for the first of your secret weapons, a fat glob of animal lard. Yes, lard, the same stuff your mother fries onions in. You scoop a dollop between your palms, smear it up your arms, rub it into the cracks of your knuckles. It's slick, it's sticky, it smells like yesterday's soup, but it works. Because in this world, there's no lotion, no moisturizer, no fluffy mittens from the village fair. There's lard. And lard keeps the cold out, sort of. Enough to fool your skin into not cracking open before lunch. You're not the only one, of course. Everyone in your house has their own version of this medieval beauty routine. Your older sister coats her face with goose grease before stepping out to the well. Your uncle swears by mixing cheap tallow with soot and rubbing it on his legs. Keeps the wind from chewing, he says. Historians still argue whether this was common practice across Europe or just a regional quirk, but folklore and scattered records suggest it was more than a joke. Animal fat was warmth in a jar, and in the absence of science, Desperation often breeds genius. Now comes the second tool, cloaks. Not just any cloaks, these are your best cloaks. Heavy wool, coarse but tightly woven, often dyed dark for practicality. Most families only have a few, some share them, others line them with spare scraps of fur if you're rich, straw if you're not. You throw yours over your head like a traveling monk and feel a brief moment of luxury. It smells like the fire, like dried sweat, like comfort. You step outside, the wind stings your cheeks. You tighten the drawstrings of your hood and push forward. Every villager looks the same in winter, an army of cloaked shadows, hunched and hurrying, breath puffing in rhythm with their footsteps. The world is white and gray, muffled by snow. The fields are buried, the trees stand like skeletons. The stream is frozen so solid even the birds have moved on. Still, you move. You're not just surviving, you're adjusting. And one of the more creative tools in your winter arsenal? Layered capes. That's right, a second, sometimes third layer draped over your shoulders, fastened with whatever pin, brooch, or bit of twine you can find. It's less fashion statement, more insulation strategy. Some villagers even stitch long strips of cloth to their inner cloaks, letting them dangle around the legs like tassels. When walking, these slap against your thighs, warming them with friction. Strange? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. One old woman in your village lines her cloak with dried moss. She claims it's the best insulator you can get without stealing sheep. Another wears a hood so large it doubles as a pillow when she crouches down. Everyone has their tricks. And it's not just about fabric, it's about ritual. Each morning, you layer up in a specific order: undergarment, tunic, hose, overtunic, cloak, hood, lard if necessary. You wrap your scarf 3 times, not at once. You tie your shoes tight to trap heat, even if that means cutting off circulation. There's a rhythm to it, a logic born from trial, error, and frostbite. Quirky tip from the village wise man: keep a potato in your pocket, not to eat, to hold. Supposedly, it remembers heat longer than stone. Historians laugh, but you've tried it, and it's not the worst idea. Then there's the cow hair mittens. Coarse, scratchy, and absurdly effective. Your cousin made a pair last year, and now half the village wants some. Who knew cows could be winter fashion icons? But not everyone's clever. That one guy, always too proud to wear more than a tunica, caught frostbite last December. He claimed he was testing his strength, lost 2 toes. Now he walks like a goose on stilts. No one says anything, but we all wear double socks now. And let's not forget the scent. You smell like fire, wool, sweat, and bacon. Everyone does. There's no shame in it. If you pass someone who smells like lavender, you run, they're either royalty or a ghost. So here you are, bundled, larded, cloaked, and waddling like a woolen turtle toward whatever task the day demands. The cold bites, but it doesn't devour. You're armored, you're prepared, you're warm enough. And in winter, warm enough is the closest thing to triumph. You stamp your feet in the packed snow, breath fogging around your hood like a reluctant halo. The sun is barely crawling above the horizon, just a sleepy smear of gray light, and your limbs are already aching from the cold. But you can't stop moving. That's the trick. That's the whole secret. Move, or freeze. You shift your weight from foot to foot, roll your shoulders, swing your arms like a windmill in slow motion. It helps. Barely. Then, without needing to be told, you start to work. Chop wood, haul buckets, shovel snow. The rhythm is what saves you. In the Middle Ages, there was no such thing as exercise. There was labor, and there was survival. Every task, from threshing wheat to pounding laundry, doubled as your winter workout. No fancy leggings, no gym memberships, just you, your body, and whatever needed lifting. Historians agree, peasants were strong, not in the carved statue way that bards sing about, but in the quiet, knotted muscled, I carried 4 buckets of frozen slop before sunrise kind of way. You earn every callus, every cracked knuckle. But even work has its limits. Sooner or later, you're stuck inside. That's when the dancing begins. Yes, dancing. You didn't expect it, but here it is. Because when the walls close in and the cold creeps through the gaps, you need to move. So someone hums, someone else claps, and before long, You're stomping in a tight circle with 3 cousins and your mother laughing louder than the wind. You call it a jig, or a shuffle, or just that thing we do so our fingers don't fall off. It's not graceful, it's not rehearsed, but it works. The movement floods your chest with warmth, sends tingles into your toes, and lifts the mood in the room like smoke chasing up to the rafters. One quirky tradition? In parts of Wales and Brittany, villagers would host warming dances, brief bursts of communal movement done every few hours, not for entertainment, just to keep the blood flowing. Some involved stomping in place, others resembled line dancing. One even featured spinning while holding a hot rock. Historians still argue whether it was a sacred ritual or just a very dangerous form of tag. In your village, there's the goose step, not the military onia. This is a peasant classic, arms flapping, feet high, exaggerated waddling to mimic the local geese. It's ridiculous, it's undignified, it's hilarious, but 5 minutes of it and your legs are burning like firewood. Even chores become choreography. Carrying water turns into a march, beating rugs becomes percussion, stirring soup involves shoulder rolls if you're feeling bold. Movement is salvation. Sometimes, the younger kids will pile on layers and just run laps around the hut, circles and circles, until the heat catches up with their lungs. Then they collapse near the hearth, panting, cheeks flushed, victorious over the cold for at least 10 minutes. You even invent games, foot fights, thumb wrestles. Don't touch the floor, it's ice. It is all designed to keep you off your frozen backside and in motion. Still, there are days when it's too cold to even move. Days when the wind howls so hard the trees outside lean like old men. On those days, you sit, huddle, breathe slowly, share warmth with your family, your cow, your soup. You only move when you must, like stirring embers or smacking your legs to make sure they still respond. But mostly, you keep going, because the cold wants you still. Stillness is surrender. Stillness is letting it win. And you're not giving in. Not today. You stretch your arms above your head, crack your back, and take one more lap around the room. Someone claps in time. Someone else joins. The dog barks. The baby squeals. Your father mutters something about dignity, and then smiles, because in this strange, shared rhythm of the freeze, you've found something close to joy. You're not warm because of the fire. You're warm because you refuse to stop moving, and that, in this world, is as close to dancing with defiance as it gets. You pull your cloak tighter and crunch across the frost-hardened path. The village is alive today, more so than usual. Voices echo off the snow, carts creak under weight, and someone's already started roasting meat, the scent cutting through the cold like a song. It's market day, winter fair. You hate leaving the warmth of your home. Well, warmth might be a stretch, but you love this. The fair is a temporary miracle, a flicker of life in the dead season. Even with the freezing wind biting your face, you can't help but grin a little as the village square appears ahead, transformed from quiet misery to something bordering on cheerful chaos. Wooden stalls groan under the weight of turnips, dried fish, cloth bundles, candles, and the occasional questionable pastry. Laughter mixes with bargaining. Someone's playing the guitar badly, someone else is juggling. You're not sure if it's for entertainment or just to keep his fingers from freezing off. These fairs aren't weekly, they're not even monthly. They appear like stars in the winter sky, brief, unexpected, and full of wonder. Villagers from miles away trudge through snow to be here, cloaks flapping like flags, carts piled high with whatever they've managed to produce. You spot a woman trading dried apples for sheepskin. A boy offers carved wooden spoons. A man loudly declares his pickled eggs are blessed by Street Agnes herself. Historians confirm that winter fairs were among the few communal events that persisted during the cold months. They weren't just for trade, they were for morale. In some towns, they aligned with religious feast days, like Candlemas or Epiphany. In others, they were simply timed for when the roads were briefly passable. And you're not here just to buy or sell, you're here to warm up, not with people. The crush of bodies generates its own kind of heat. You weave between bundled figures, bump shoulders, feel breath on your face that isn't your own. It's oddly comforting, even if it smells faintly of smoked eel. You pass a food stall and your stomach clenches. Hot meat pies, the holy grail. Steam curls from the crusts like incense. You've saved a coin, just one, and today you spend it without guilt. The pie is small, probably half turnip, but it's hot, and the first bite nearly brings tears to your eyes. You wander further, cheeks flushed now not from cold but from excitement. A group of young women dance in a circle, boots stomping, skirts flaring over woolen leggings. A man dressed as a bear roars and children shriek with joy. A friar hands out mulled ale, fortified for the spirit, he says, but you know it's just strong enough to warm your ribs. One old man sells candles shaped like angels, stars, pigs, and sausages. You ask why sausages? He grins, toothless. Because no one eats angels. You laugh out loud. It feels strange and wonderful, like remembering what your own voice sounds like. Here's a fringe belief. Some fairs included blessing fire as a small ceremonial braziers where villagers warmed their hands and whispered wishes. Touching the flame was said to bring luck, or fertility, or simply the courage to face the next storm. Historians still argue whether this was more pagan or Christian in origin, but you don't care. You step toward one now, hands outstretched. The heat bites back the cold instantly. You sigh. Someone next to you mutters a prayer. Someone else just mutters. But you all linger, basking in this temporary, sacred warmth. Eventually, you'll have to leave. Walk back through the frozen fields. Return to your fire, your pottage, your scratchy blankets. But for now, you're warm from the inside out. From food, from movement, from the people pressed all around you, each one carrying their own little flame of survival. You stay until the sun fades and the snow glows blue. Then you head home, one hand still warm from the pie, the other from the fire. And for a moment, winter doesn't feel quite so long. You slip through the old wooden door of the village church, the heavy latch clicking softly behind you. Instantly, the outside world vanishes. The snow, the wind, the aching cold, it's all muffled, like someone pressed a thick wool blanket over the entire countryside. Inside, it's not exactly warmer but it's warmer, and that's all you need. The thick stone walls hold on to heat like secrets, and even the faint scent of incense clings like a promise. You step forward, boots thudding dully against the flagstone floor. A few candles flicker near the altar. You pass rows of wooden pews, most worn smooth by generations of restless fingers and fidgeting children. The air carries that odd churchy smell, a mix of wax, smoke, dust, and centuries of whispered guilt. You're not here for confession, you're here for survival. And you're not alone. Already, a handful of villagers are scattered in the pews, huddled together or sitting still with eyes closed, pretending to pray or maybe just meditating on the miracle of being out of the wind. One woman's knitting under her cloak. A boy is asleep on his father's lap, mouth open, snoring faintly. A few teens in the back whisper, hands cupped to hide their grins. Church in winter becomes a haven not just for the soul, but for the body. Historians largely agree, though churches were never heated by modern standards, they were often warmer than homes due to thicker walls, smaller windows, and the sheer number of bodies that gathered inside. Mass might be long, but at least it was indoors. Plus, there was movement. You'd stand, sit, kneel, cross yourself, whisper, sing. Even if you didn't understand Latin, you understood rhythma, and rhythm meant circulation. Some churches even encouraged attendance by stoking small braziers near the front. In a few documented cases, hot stones were placed under pews in bitter winters. Was it pious generosity or just practical hospitality? Historians still argue over it. But there's another draw. The candles. So many candles, tall ones on the altar, little votives flickering in nooks, each one a tiny sun. You can't help but drift toward them, hands outstretched, soaking up what warmth they offer. And it's not just heat, it's the light. After days cloaked in gray, the gold of candlelight feels sacred, a soft, rich, humming with quiet reassurance. You imagine the flames talking to one another, sharing secrets from across the centuries. The priest eventually enters, robes swishing softly, breath puffing like yours. He offers a nod. His voice is a hush, but his eyes sparkly. He knows why you're here. Not just for salvation, for the warmth. And he's not about to turn you away. You sit in a pew, feeling your cloak slowly thaw, the ice on your boots melting into little puddles that stain the stone. For the first time today, you stop shivering. Even your fingers relax, no longer clawed against the cold. You flex them, one at a time, There's still pain, but now it's distant, manageable. Someone begins to sing a plain chant, slow and low, echoing off the stone with a haunting beauty. You close your eyes, not to sleep, not to pray, just to rest, just to listen. There's a strange peace here. Even the coughs, the sniffles, the shifting feet somehow, they're part of the symphony. Like the building itself breathes along with you. You remember hearing on Sia, perhaps from a traveling friar, that some believed warmth in a church was proof of God's favor. That if you walked in shivering and left a little stronger, it meant your soul was lighter, too. A comforting idea, if a bit optimistic. Still, you linger. Long after the prayer ends, long after the priest retreats to his chambers, you and the others stay, silent and still, letting your bodies knit themselves back together, piece by frozen piece. Eventually, you'll leave. You'll step back into the wind, trudge through slush, maybe slip on a patch of hidden ice. You'll curse. You'll pull your hood tighter. But for now, you're safe. You're warm. You're inside something older than winter, and stronger. You light the candle with a shaky breath, shielding the tiny flame from the draft sneaking through the wattle walls. It flickers, dances, then steadies. A miracle, really, considering the wick is barely more than a twisted rag, and the wax isn't wax at all. It's tallow rendered animal fat. You made it yourself. Well, you and your mother, boiled down scraps from the last pig slaughter, strained, poured into a mold, left to cool, and finally crowned with a stub of old wine. It smokes, it smells, it's light, and in winter, light means warmth, even if only an illusion. You glance around the room. 3 more tallow candles sputter along the edges, casting shadows that stretch like lazy ghosts. They don't heat the place like a hearth, but they fight the dark. And that's half the battle. Historians note that peasants had limited access to beeswax candles. Those were for churches, nobles, or particularly smug monks. But tallow was peasant gold. Cheap, abundant, if you had livestock, and just greasy enough to coat your fingers forever. Of course, there were downsides. The smell, the smoke, the tendency to sputter or collapse if you didn't get the mold right. But you learned, everyone learned, because when winter swallowed the sun by mid-afternoon, you needed light just to exist, and with light came a little more heat. You kneel by the hearth and place a candle inside a small clay bowl filled with dried herbs, not to eat, to simmer. The heat releases a faint scent of sage and rosemary, mostly meant to cover the tallow's pungency, and maybe, just maybe, to keep bad spirits at bay. Your grandmother swears by it. One fringe belief from your region says that placing a lit candle in each window would keep frost fairies out, or invite blessings, or both, depending on the moon phase. Historians still argue whether these customs were Christianized folklore or stubborn remnants of older pagan traditions. You don't care. You light the candles anyway, because you know what happens without them. You remember last winter, the night the fire died, no wood left, wind screaming like a drunk banshee through the shutters, your breath fogging the air. Even indoors, you curled up beside your sister, both of you too cold to speak. One candle only burned beside the pot. It gave no heat, not really, but it gave hope, and you held on to them like a lifeline. These days, you make sure there are always a few ready. Some are stumpy, with crooked wicks, others stand tall in little iron holders, collected over years from market stalls or abandoned barns. One's shaped like a goose. You don't know why, you don't question it, and when things get truly desperate, you get creative. You've burned twisted cloth soaked in oil. You've ignited pine resin scraped from trees. You once used a hollowed-out turnip filled with lard and a feather. It worked, briefly. Smelled like roasted regret, but again a light. Your family gathers close around the main candle now. You all lean in, hands open, eyes squinting, not to read or write, to see one another, to talk, to be human again after a long, frigid day. Someone tells a story, someone else passes around a sliver of cheese. You hold your hands close to the flame, not because it's warm enough to matter, but because it feels like it should be. That tiny illusion is everything. And when the candle gutters low, you snuff it gently, press your fingers to the warm wax, and carry the heat back to your bed. It'll fade fast, but for a few precious seconds, it lingers. Later, in the dark, you'll still smell it in your hair, in the folds of your tunic, in the soft soot smear on your palm. The memory of light, the ghost of warmth. That's how you make it through. You lie awake in the dark, listening. Outside, the wind moans like an old man with secrets. The roof creaks, a shutter knocks gently, over and over, like a child asking to be let in, but you don't move. Not yet. You're curled under a mound of woolen hay and whatever else the family has thrown over your sleeping form. It's not comfortable, but it's familiar. That counts for something. The fire's mostly out now. A faint red glow pulses in the ash. There's no real heat left, only memory, the kind that seeps into your bones and whispers, "You're still alive." But sleep's tricky. The nights are long, brutally long. In the depths of winter, darkness can stretch for 16 hours or more. No sun, no stars, just shadow and silence and the occasional drip of snow melting through the thatch. You wake up and it's still dark. You nap again, only to discover it's still not even close to a morning. Time slows, stretched too far, and your mind begins to wander in strange directions. So what do? You fill the darkness with stories, with songs, with whatever keeps the silence from swallowing you whole. Tonight, it's your father who speaks first. His voice gravelly from smoke and age. He tells a tale you've heard a dozen times, the one about the knight who froze solid on the battlefield but came back to life with the first sunrise. Nonsense, of course, but you listen anyway. Your sister snorts halfway through. She always does. Your grandmother hums a tune, low and slow, like she's keeping time with the wind. One cousin starts in with a joke about a rooster and a priest. It makes no sense. You laugh anyway. The night is held at bay. Historians believe these long winter nights were some of the most formative times for oral tradition. With no books, no light, no outside distraction, stories passed from mouth to ear like heirlooms. Tales of saints, monsters, miracles, ancestors all mixed together in a cozy stew of memory and imagination. And then there are the songs, old ones, half-forgotten melodies that loop endlessly until someone mumbles, "Not that one again," but then joins in anyway. There's a fringe tradition from the Baltic coast, a warming song sung in rounds, believed to call spring back from the underworld. Scholars still argue if it was symbolic or seasonal karaoke. But in your home, you've got your own version. It's just a hum, really, no words, just rhythm and breath, but it fills the room like steam from the soup pot. And still, the night stretches. Someone shifts beside you, a knee in your ribs. You grunt, they grunt back. The cow makes noise like she's dreaming of greener fields. The fire lets out one last crackle and goes quiet. You reach into the darkness and find someone's hand, your little brother's, maybe. Cold, small, you hold it anyway. That's how you get through. And when the stories run dry, when the songs fade, you talk, softly, about spring, mostly. What you'll plant, what you'll trade, what kind of miracle it'll be to feel mud again instead of frost. You wonder aloud if the river will flood again this year. Your uncle mutters something about the mill wheel needing repairs. Your aunt says she misses berries. The little one says, "I want honey." Everyone sighs, and then a quiet, that deep, collective hush that settles over a room like a quilt. The moment when even the cold seems to pause. You close your eyes. The wind still howls. The darkness still stretches, but your mind is busy now building castles from stories, planting orchards from dreams, warming itself beside fires not yet lit. Because here's the truth. You survive the long night by filling it, with voices, with warmth, with the thump of a heartbeat beside you in the straw. And if you're lucky, you drift off in the middle of someone else's sentence, a smile on your cracked lips. The shadows pulling a little less tightly around the edges. The morning starts as it always does, with a slap of cold air to the face and the faint realization that you probably drooled on your blanket again. You sit up slowly, the straw mat beneath you crinkling like old parchment. Your joints ache, your nose is numb, but you're here, breathing, mostly functional. Congratulations. Outside, the village begins to stir. Distant footsteps scrunch through frost. A rooster, confused by the lack of sunlight, gives a half-hearted crow and promptly regrets it. The air is sharp, crisp, and thick with anticipation because today, something is off. There's tension in the room. Your grandmother is muttering prayers under her breath. Your uncle is nailing sprigs of holly above the door. Your mother is burning a small braid of dried herbs in the hearth, filling the house with a sweet, earthy smoke. Why, because tonight is Midwinter's Evia, or something like it. The names vary, the meanings blur, but the fear, that's consistent. You see, long before calendars were common, villagers used stars, seasons, and stories to mark time, and Midwinter was a threshold, a night said to be thinner, stranger, more dangerous than most, a night when frost wasn't just cold, it was alive. Historians still debate how widespread this belief was, or whether it came from Norse myth, Christian fasting, or older, forgotten traditions. But in your village, it's real enough to act on. Tonight, the family won't just huddle for warmth, they'll ward. You begin with charms, scratched into wood, hung from rafters. Some are shaped like stars, others like suns. One, your favorite, looks like a chicken doing battle with a snowflake. You're not sure if it's effective, but it's adorable. Next comes the ritual sweeping. Every corner of the house is brushed with a birch branch atop to bottom while someone chants something half-remembered from a time when chanting was more common. Out with the cold, out with the night, out with the hunger that bites and bites. Quirky? Absolutely. Effective? Maybe. You find yourself glancing over your shoulder more than usual today. Every creak of the wall, every flutter of the thatch, every time the candle flickers for no reason. And then there's the frostbite talk, not the medical kind, the other kind. Because some people say that frostbite is not just a thing that happens, but a thing that visits. An entity, an old, pale woman with fingers like icicles and a voice like the crack of frozen branches. The cold crone, the ice widow, the bleak bride. Names differ, fear doesn't. There's an old tale your grandfather tells, usually after 2 mugs of warm ale, about a boy who left the fire on Midwinter's Eve to relieve himself and never came back. They found him frozen, smiling, his footprints turning back just a few paces too late. Do you believe it? You're not sure, but you still stay close to the fire tonight. And not just for heat. You help reinforce the shutters. You help tie straw dolls and place them at the threshold. You whisper stay warm, stay whole 3 times while passing the pot of pottage, because your mother insists the food absorbs intentions. Some villagers will walk in circles around their homes with torches. Others will bury coins in the snow to trick spirits into thinking they've already claimed a life that night. Superstition? Desperation? Both. Either way, everyone's on edge, but also, somehow, hopeful. Because here's the secret buried deep in all this folklore: Midwinter means the worst is halfway over. The nights, however long, are beginning to shorten. The sun, however shy, is returning. And so, while fear hovers at the edges, you gather with your family around the hearth. The pot bubbles, the candles flicker, the cow shifts and lets out a tired sigh. Your father raises a cup of warm ale. He says, to frost, to fire, and to finding spring again. Everyone clinks, or tries to. Most of the cups are chipped. You smile, because you've made it this far, through the dark, through the cold, through the longest nights anyone can remember, and die. And if you can survive tonight, you can survive anything. You wake to a strange silence. No wind, no creaking, no muffled curses from your uncle trying to unstick the barn door. Just stillness, thick and soft as wool. You blink and sit up slowly, joints stiff but less miserable than usual. Something's a broken bar different. The light in the room feels warmer, like the morning sun remembered it was supposed to show up. You rise, shuffle to the door, and ease it open. Outside, the world is transformed. The snow glitters like powdered glass. The trees shimmer with frost, every branch etched in silver, and above it all, the sky glows a blue, not gray, not white, but clear, sharp, defiant blue. You breathe in, and for once it doesn't hurt. It's not spring, not yet, but it's a whisper, a hint, the first real sign that winter has begun to blink. Inside, the family is stirring. No one says it out loud, but you all feel it. A mood shift, a lifting. The fire seems brighter, the pot of pottage seems richer, even the cow seems smug. You take your morning mug of hot ale, today sweetened with a sliver of dried apple, and settle by the fire, shoulders wrapped in your cloak. The warmth settles into your bones like an old friend. And you realize, you made it. Not because winter is over, it's not. There will be more storms, more frost, more nights that stretch on forever, but something inside you has changed, hardened, strengthened. You've learned to live with the cold, to outsmart it, dance through it, laugh in its frozen face. You've learned that warmth isn't always a fire. Sometimes it's a story, or a shared bed, or a cow in your living room. Sometimes it's a pie from the market or a candle stub flickering bravely in the dark. Historians might debate the facts, the numbers, the weather patterns, but they'll never quite capture what it feels like here to survive winter without central heating, electric lights, or fleece-lined boots. Just grit, fat, wool, and fire. You think back over the past weeks, the huddling, the dancing, the rituals, the lard, so much lard, and you smile, because it wasn't just about staying alive, it was about staying human. Your sister passes you a slice of barley bread, still warm from the hearthstone. You tear it in half and hand her the bigger piece. She doesn't say thanks, she just grins and eats. The day stretches ahead, quiet and hopeful. And in that stillness, that rare and sacred calm, your eyes grow heavy. You lean back, let the fire talk in its popping, whispering language. Let the candlelight flicker across your face. Let the cold stay outside. For now, you rest. For now, you're safe. For now, you're warmed out. And now, as the fire crackles low and your breath slows with the rhythm of rest, let yourself settle deeper into the warmth of that imagined hearth. The wind outside may still roam the hills and tug at shutters, but in here, the cold cannot touch you. You're wrapped in thick wool, surrounded by the gentle snoring of family and the soft weight of safety. Let your mind drift back to the quiet crackle of straw beneath you, the scent of smoke and soup lingering in the air, the glow of tallow candles flickering like sleepy stars, the memory of laughter echoing from a story told around the hearth just an hour ago. You've weathered the worst of it. You've outlasted frostbite, empty cupboards, and long nights that seem to stretch forever. You've danced for heat, sung to scare off the dark, and slept with livestock as bedfellows. And yet, you remain a soft-hearted, soot-streaked, and stubborn in all the right ways. Let your breath fall easy now. Each inhale brings calm, each exhale a little more peace. Outside the walls, the seasons still shift, but you've found your warmth, not just in fire or food or fleecia but in resilience, in community, in all those little moments that kept the cold at bay. So let your body sink, let your thoughts loosen like the thawing ground. Let this moment, simple and still, be enough. Sleep well, traveler of winters past. You're safe now. You're warm. You're home.